I'm not gonna answer that. It's stupid.
You're very smart, Joey. You give me all these answers, but you ain't give me the right answer. I'll ask you again. Did you or did you not?
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where we are continuing our season of Scorsese and continuing, I hope, concluding our exploration of what is arguably his opus masterpiece, Raging Bull. My name is Steve Morris. I'm a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Stop saying hopefully. We are going to finish today. This is the third installment. It's done. We've got the Jesus Resurrection to get to. This is the Outlaw John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, and host and voiceover artist in San Diego, California. And I'm dreading getting into the next section of the movie, just like I always dread the last 20 minutes of Goodfellas. But we are in for a hell of a ride from here on into the end of that movie, Steve. So here we go.
Yeah. And one thing before we jump in is I think we've announced before, we are now have a subscription available on Apple Podcasts. It has the same features as the $5 tier on patreon.com/thecine-files. And so if you are an Apple customer and they already have your credit info, the easiest way for you to support the show and get ad-free versions of all of our episodes, as well as our Cine-Files shorts, just go to Apple Podcasts, search for the Cine-Files, and hit that little button that says subscribe. But now, Jake LaMotta has just won the middleweight championship of the world. His goal has been fulfilled, the driving force of his life he has achieved, and I think he's probably going to be a pretty happy guy from now on. What do you think?
Sure. In a perfect world, he would have been, but of course, he's got a lot of issues going on. So he's going to slam down a lot of food, become a very irritable person, angry at the world even more so because he hates himself so much. He's achieved this thing that he thinks symbolizes success for him, and even now he's not happy with that success because he was never happy as a person. And I think there's a great lesson to come here after all the madness we're about to experience in the next few scenes.
So where we start off is we're back at his house, and he is fiddling with the antenna of the TV. Jake is looking a bit heavier at this point. Do you remember fiddling with antennas of TVs?
Oh God, yes. Are you kidding? I remember. For you kids out there, you've never had this experience, but most of us of a certain age, we were the human remotes, where our parents, who were not technically proficient, would send us to the television to not only change the channel for them, and that's no joke, I'm not lying about that, but also fiddle with the television, trying to get the signal to come in, whether it was through using a barbed wire hanger, this side of Mommy Dearest, or tinfoil, or banging on the TV, or even moving the TV all around the room. So yes, I absolutely remember this experience very vividly.
The worst is when you're holding the antenna and it finally is like, oh, the picture's clear. And then you let go of the antenna and it goes away. And they're like, can you just hold on to the antenna while we watch? Yeah. With cable TV coming in the 80s was very exciting.
Don't tell me that you shouldn't watch a movie a certain way when most of us discovered watching great movies standing next to the television, leaning down to take a look at the picture while our parents watched at the same time.
So Jake and Joey are arguing about how to fix the TV when in comes Vicky from being outside doing something, and she comes in. You immediately feel the tension.
Yeah.
And then she goes up and kisses her brother-in-law, Joey, on the lips.
Where were you?
What's the matter?
Television won't work. Where'd you go?
I went out. Went shopping. Went to my sister's. Yeah.
Scorsese is so good at creating a specific shot that you notice because it's unusual.
Yeah.
And if in this case, she goes upstairs and we see her upstairs, and then there's an unmotivated camera move, which means there's nothing in the frame. The camera just moves off the stairs and goes back to that two shot. And what's interesting about this is that we're going to repeat this exact shot later on.
Yeah.
And Jake is staring at Joey with that sort of dead Jake LaMotta stare and says,
What's the matter with you, huh? What's with this kissing on the mouth?
I just said hello. Can I kiss my sister-in-law?
And is she good enough for you? I don't even kiss mom on the mouth the way you kiss. All of a sudden, you're like a Romeo.
So you're not supposed to kiss your mother on the mouth.
That's what I'm talking about.
And then Joey starts bringing up and basically, busting his brother's balls about the fact that he's put on weight.
And this mirrors the scene we saw right near the beginning of the movie,
Yes.
where he comes in and all of that and has a conversation with him. Different wife, different situation there, but certainly criticizing him about his weight. And he took it in stride back then, but now because he's angry about so many other things, it gets lumped into the pile of this anger, and it begins the slow unraveling of Jake LaMotta here.
It's funny. It never occurred to me until just this moment. I was about to ask you the question if you'd been in this situation where you started a thing that you thought was joking and then found out that it wasn't joking. And of course, I know that we have. And the reason I know is because we discussed it when we discussed Goodfellas and the Tommy scene where, oh, I'm a clown, I amuse you. Like Scorsese likes to play in this area where one person thinks that what's happening is in the scene is one thing, and the other person thinks it's something else.
Hey, Joe, what happened when you and Sal at the Copa that time?
What?
When you gave him a beating?
You mean when I caught his head in the taxi cab door, I was banging it, smacked him with a glass and everything?
Yeah.
I told you about that.
I think Joey is so dumb in this whole thing.
Okay.
Because look, when a huge thing happens, and this is a huge thing, a public brawl with a mafia member at the Copacabana where you banged his head in a taxi cab, this is a thing that many, many people are going to hear about.
Yes.
And you know that it was really about your exceptionally crazily brother's wife who he's jealous of. Like, you know that, and you have not come up with a good lie. And now he's just saying, oh, I told you about that. It's like, you are, dude, what are you playing with here?
I think he's just trying to keep him off the scent. And since he knows how Jake is, he's just trying to downplay it and pretend like it's nothing. I think he's actually doing what he's always done with Jake, which is whenever Jake's upset about something, just kind of ride it out, downplay it, don't make it seem that big of a deal, and wait for the wave of anger to wash over Jake and for him to let it go. Because I imagine there's been quite a few instances where Joey and Jake have had these issues between them, where Joey hasn't told him the full story about something. Because even earlier in the film, when he's like, well, was it Sal or whatever, coming down and taking a look at things, he doesn't tell Jake the full story of it, and Jake gets mad and unleashes on him and hits him in the ribs and causes a fight. But this is the first time where we see it really get into the realm of fear, like utter fear for us as an audience watching this happen as he gets, because Jake gives no kind of indication that there's any shred of humanity left inside of him. Like, you just, with the thing in the beginning and the thing later on with Sal, like, there's a real frustration or an anger or a playful anger at himself that he has in those moments. But here, he is absolutely focused on Joey, and every single word coming out of Joey's mouth, every single facial tick, every single body movement, he is watching him like you'd watch in a nature special where a tiger or a lion is watching its prey before it jumps, waiting for its prey to make that one wrong move so it can absolutely consume it. And that's what slowly starts to become, for me, what is happening in this scene.
You know what? I think you're 100% right, because Joey, on some level, has always been able to handle his brother.
Yes.
And I mean that in both meanings. Like, one is, hey, I can handle it. And the other is, he is handling him.
Right.
He is giving him the information that he needs and withholding other information in order to keep Jake doing the behavior that he wants him to keep.
Yes.
He doesn't know at this moment that something has shifted.
Yeah.
And the technique he's going to use to handle him isn't going to work anymore.
I think that's where, when you said Joey is stupid here, he's stupid here because he didn't see this. He didn't see the switch. Right.
I still say I'm a very strong believer in getting ahead of lies. If you're going to put a lie out, you got to be real clear about what your lie is going to be. Otherwise, you're going to get in trouble. And the way he handles this is not smart.
How come you never told me about it?
What didn't have anything to do with you?
And you can see the wheels turn in Jake's head at this moment.
Had nothing to do with me?
No.
Who did that have something to do with? Vicky?
Now, here's my question.
Yeah.
Does Jake know that whether or not Vicky was at the Copa that night?
Yes.
I think 100% he knows.
That, as you said earlier, it was such a massive fight. Everybody talked about it. And it's a small neighborhood, so to speak, even though it's in a big city. And I think people, the message got back to Jake. What happened got back to Jake. And probably more than a few people told Jake. Because remember, he's the middleweight champion of the world. Everybody wants to talk to him. So all these people are going to come out of the woodwork to try to tell him what happened with his brother. So,
Hey, Jack, I just explained the whole thing to you, didn't I?
Yeah.
It was between me and Salvi. If it had anything to do with you and Vicky, I would have told you about it.
And Jake stares at him. And the note that I wrote does not do justice to what De Niro's doing at this moment. I just wrote crazy look. But that is not sufficient to explain. And I don't know what's happening. De Niro's just dead stare is so scary and so intense.
That's not what I heard, Joe.
What do you mean that's not what you heard?
That's not what I heard.
What'd you hear?
I heard some things.
You heard about me and Salvi then?
I heard things, Joey.
Yeah, you heard that I cracked Salvi all around. What'd you hear?
Joey. I heard things.
This is like classic De Niro for me.
Yeah, iconic line that everyone has imitated for sure. I heard things. I heard some things. Yeah.
And now Joey tries to change this topic. He goes,
what things you heard?
I heard some things.
Hey, you heard things. You want to worry? Don't start that worrying shit. You know what you should worry about? Worry you got this title fight next month.
This time I wrote, then that long, crazy, stubborn, fearless, rock-headed look from Jake. And he asks,
Did Salvi fuck Vicky?
Oh my God. Out of nowhere, bro. Out of nowhere.
I don't know. It's not out of nowhere.
Well, no, I mean like he goes right to the jugular.
Yes.
Is what I mean. He's been kind of toying with him, and then bang, out of nowhere, right into what he's been trying to get at to unsettle Joey. So, I mean, Jake's not as dumb as he looks. He fights Joey like he fights in the ring. Peppers Joey, softens Joey up, and then he goes for the fucking knockout punch when he asks him the question. That's essentially what you're watching is Jake boxing Joey verbally.
Well, and it's the same dogged advancement, you know, like he's not Jake is not a trickster. He's just advancing.
Joey, I asked you. Didn't I ask you keep an eye on it?
And I did keep an eye on it. Yes, I did.
How come you gave him a beat?
I told you that. I told you what that was all about. Didn't have nothing to do with you. He thinks he's a wise guy now.
Joey, don't lie to me.
I'm not lying.
What do I look like to you, huh?
Hey, I'm your brother. You're supposed to believe me. Don't you trust me?
No, I don't.
What's so hard about this is that there's this place where it is offensive for you to tell me that I'm lying to you.
Yeah, right.
But it's also offensive for me to say, don't you need to trust me? Don't you trust me? You know what I mean?
Right.
Because, and this is where Jake is right on some level of like, you've already lied to me.
I got to accept your answer, you know. But I'm telling you now, if I hear anything, I swear on our mother, I'm going to kill somebody.
And then Joey takes another tactic. And I totally understand this tactic, which is he takes the exaggeration tactic. Yep. He's like, oh, I'm going to take the thing that you said and exaggerate it to an extreme to make it look ridiculous. Unfortunately, that tactic does not work well with crazy people.
No, it doesn't.
Well, go ahead and kill everybody. You're a tough guy. Go kill people. Kill Vicky, kill Salvi, kill Tommy Como, kill me while you're at it. What do I care? You're killing yourself the way you eat. You fat fuck. Look at you.
And Jake stares at him. And he stares at him. And it's so funny because there's this one sentence in that last speech that you could see Jake grab onto, you know, like with the pincer talons, and he's not going to let go.
What do you mean? I don't understand. What do you mean kill you?
Me. Kill me. Start here. Kill me first. Do me a fucking favor. Because you're driving me crazy.
Which is just a thing that you say in the fight. Yeah, go ahead and kill me.
Yeah.
But that's not what he hears. And you could see the moment that Joey realizes that he's in danger.
Excuse me, what do you mean by you, though?
So? What does that mean? Don't
Yeah,
mean
but
nothing.
even you don't even know what you meant by you.
Which is a great line. It's a very confused line. I struggled to say it a moment ago, but it's a really great line.
You mentioned Tommy, you mentioned Salvi, you mentioned you. You included you with them. You could have said anybody, but you said you and them.
What is the logic behind what Jake just said there?
Look, the thing I haven't said about this scene between us, and of course people are going to hear this as well, but in my early angry days of my 20s, I have had moments like Jake. Now, I've never put my hands on anybody like Jake did, but I do remember being this phenomenally insecure, angry, temperamental person who hated himself so much that he was constantly paranoid that people were doing stuff behind his back or saying stuff behind his back or weren't telling him the whole truth. Okay. And so I've had those moments, and especially when I was in the military, where I would just stare at somebody and ask them questions until they told me what I thought was the truth. So I've been in Jake's position, and I've been in Joey's position later on in my life when I was on the other end of some pretty intense people who had this very scary approach to the world and were asking me questions, wanting to get certain answers that validated their anger or points of views on things. So I've been in both of these positions. So I can speak knowledgeably about what Steve is asking me. So I'm going to tell you exactly what Jake is doing here. Jake is doing this because Joey, in Jake's mind, Joey has outed himself inadvertently and put himself in the company with these people that Jake knows or believes or suspects are terrible people who use people, abuse people, who've made love to his wife, had sex with his wife. And so in his mind, by Joey putting himself in with these people, by mentioning himself with these people, he is in essence admitted his own guilt without knowing he admitted his own guilt. That's what Jake thinks. Jake thinks he's figured him out and he's smarter than Joey and he's caught him. So that's exactly what is going on in this moment.
So, and I think I totally agree that what's happened is he has become paranoid about Vicky. Mm-hmm. And earlier on has gone, I know she's up to something. Yeah, and then later on goes, if only I could catch her at it. Because it's gone from, I believe she's up to something, to I know she's up to something, to now I want to catch her at it. Right. And part of it is with Salvi. That's the most obvious person. She must be having an affair with him. And I'm sure in his brain, he has visualized the affair. Yeah. And then because he saw her kiss Tommy on the lips right before the middleweight championship fight, now he's included Tommy. So it's, she might not just be having an affair with Saul. Right. She's having an affair with Tommy too. And so then there's this story of Joey beating up Sal at the Copa, which Joey just lied to him about, which he knows involves Vicky. And so he's already started to make this connection so that when Joey says, kill them, kill me, and he's like, well, you included you with them. Therefore, Joey has had sex with his wife.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's outed himself.
You really let this girl ruin your life. Look at you. She really did some job on you. You know how fucking nuts you are? Look what she did to you.
And Jake does not respond to that. Jake says,
you fucked my wife.
What?
So do you want to know what happened on the set at this time?
Please.
So they're doing the scene and, Joe Pesci's a great actor, but Scorsese doesn't feel like he's getting the reaction he wants from Pesci. And they've done the scene a few times. He gives good reactions and he goes up to De Niro and he says, I want you to change the line. And so the next line for the reaction shot, so they're on Joey, they're not on De Niro at this point, is he doesn't ask, you fuck my wife. He says, you fuck your mother?
Holy God. That's what he says to him?
Yep. You fuck your mother?
Oh my God.
And that Joe Pesci gives is in a response to that line.
You fuck my wife.
What?
That's awesome.
Well, and we've seen this a bunch now with De Niro, with Scorsese coming up with improvised moments to push that scene another. Because and this is as a director and as an editor, it doesn't matter how you got to the reaction that you wanted. It only matters that you got it on film, so you can cut it in. And this is what they did. And then he doesn't respond, and then it's the hard-headed, direct repetition of Jake LaMotta.
You fuck my wife.
How could you ask me a question like that? How could you ask me? I'm your brother. You ask me that? Where do you get your balls big enough to ask me that?
Just tell me.
Now, again, I'm going to say, I think you and I both strongly, strongly believe that Joey did not have an affair with Vicky. No. That's just not at all. But there are people out there who've watched this movie who think that he might have.
Yes, you brought that up earlier on the show. Yeah. Or one of the earlier parts. Yeah.
In Joey's mind, at this moment, how dangerous does he think this situation is?
I think he's starting to slowly grasp how dangerous it is, but he hasn't fully grasped how dangerous it is. But he is feeling something in the pit of his stomach because there's no way out, right? Like Joey is I would say he's a smart guy. He figures things out, right? We see Jake put him in charge of his business affairs. So clearly he must respect his intelligence at some level. And we saw him display his intelligence at the kitchen table. And he was like, even if you lose, you win. When you win, you win. And even if you lose, you win. So he's a smart guy. So in this moment, I think he's starting to understand, like, there is nothing I can say to get me out of this. There is nothing I can tell him that will get me out of this. And since I lied to him already about what happened at the club and what it was all about to protect Vicky, now if I told him the whole truth, he's going to destroy me.
Yeah.
So there's no options left for Joey at this point but to find a way out of this and keep Jake at bay. So I think he's really starting to grasp this, that there's really no answer he can give Jake that will appease him.
Well, and I think Jake and Joey, they're brothers. I think their relationship has always had violence in it.
Yeah,
they've always fought since they were 5-6 years old, since they were in the reform school together. We've seen, come on, I want you to hit me in the face. And he does. We see when Jake is pissed off about Sal being at the gym that he takes it out on Joey. We see him kind of take it out on Joey before they go into the middleweight championship.
Right.
The fact that Joey might have to take a punch, I think is built into their relationship.
Yeah.
I think he accepts occasionally I'm going to have to take a punch and I'm probably going to punch my brother too. And that's normal. And I think we're moving into this area where Joey is going, this isn't the normal thing. This isn't going to be just, I might have to take a punch.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to be something completely different.
Yeah.
And his response, and this is where I get into this paradox of like, you can't answer, but you can't say you're not going to answer because both of them are suspicious. He says,
I'm not answering it. I'm not going to answer that. It's stupid.
There's this long look, and very calmly, Jake says,
You're very smart, Joey. You give me all these answers, but you ain't give me the right answer. I'm asking you again. Did you or did you not?
And the quietness of this scene is just, it's a terrifying scene, frankly.
Very terrifying.
Yeah.
Hugely terrifying.
It's a sick question. You're a sick fuck, and I'm not that sick that I'm going to answer it. I'm not telling you anything. I'm going to leave. If Lenore calls, tell her I went home. I'm not staying in this nut house with you. You're a sick bastard. I feel sorry for you. I really do.
He's decided to go back to the earlier relationship and pretend this isn't happening. He goes back to the weight.
You know what you should do? Try a little more fucking, a little less eating. You won't have troubles upstairs in your bedroom, and you won't pick it out on me and everybody else. You understand, you fucking wacko? You're cracking up.
And we hear him leave. But we stick on Jake.
Yeah.
Who's just present in this way that only De Niro can be. Yeah. And then we cut to the exact same shot I mentioned before, which is for no reason at all. The camera starts on the stairway and then pans back to Jake just standing there in the room.
Yeah.
And it's such a perfect, it's a really weird choice, but it totally reminds you Vicky is upstairs.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It makes you hyper aware.
Yeah.
We go upstairs, she's in the bedroom making the bed. I'm terrified at this point in the film.
Of course.
And he's standing behind her as she's making the bed, and he's pulling on her ponytail.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel, the way he's holding that ponytail?
Again, this is a predator hunting his prey and playing with his prey. With Joey, he's playing with him intellectually, right? And I don't mean intellectually like he's a fucking genius or anything. I just mean like mentally. Mentally irregular, as Rocky might say. Then he goes up the stairs, and clearly, as we've said before in the previous parts of this conversation on Raging Bull, he's been physical with Vicky throughout their relationship. So he already has a language that he uses with her that is beyond just words. It's always accompanied by something physical. So the fact that he's playing with a ponytail, in a way, is like a lion fucking with its prey. Like if you watch those nature documentaries on how killer whales fuck with seals before they eat them, they bop them around, they push them around, they chase them around, they smack them around. They do not just bite and eat the seal right off the bat. They fuck with its prey for a while before they kill it in a special sick way of enjoyment that they like to do that. And I think here, in a way, Jake, because he feels powerless in his own life, because here he is unhappy. Even though he's won the belt, he's put on this weight because he hates himself so much he won't keep himself in shape to fight. And now he's going to take out this self-hatred on Vicky by cornering her, by intimidating her, by pushing her around to try to demean her to make her at his level. And that's what we see. And that's why he's playing with her ponytail and doing what, because he knows the tactics to use to fuck with her and make her scared, you know?
I think too,
classic abusive behavior of a man.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And when you're in an abusive relationship, when you're the victim of an abuser, you have to figure out, how can I navigate this and stay safe?
Yeah.
The moment he walks into the room, I think she knows she's in danger.
Yes.
And now she's trying to walk that tightrope. You know, he's pulling on her hair. She knows where this can go. Yes. And she's trying to like keep things calm. And he asks,
how come you didn't tell me about the copa?
Tell you what about it?
You know. How come you didn't tell me about it? Why didn't you tell me about it, huh?
I don't know what you're talking about.
He pulls that hair and then he slaps her 3 times.
Yep.
Why didn't you tell me, huh? Did you fuck my brother?
And I think she knows at this moment we're in a different place.
Yeah.
And so she stands up to him.
Huh? Get off me, you fat pig!
Did you? Huh?
No!
And she struggles. She gets away, rolls off the bed, goes in the bathroom, and he starts calling her through the door. She calls him sick.
Yeah.
And now, by the way, in addition to the fucking Sal and fucking Tommy, in his mind is the truth.
Yeah.
He believes that's 100% true.
Yes.
Now it has been confirmed in his mind that she's also having sex with his brother.
Yes.
I just want to ask you one thing. Why did you fuck Joey?
I love the way she says,
"Get away!"
And then he breaks through that door.
I mean, one movement.
And the way the door breaks.
Yeah.
Is and you can't really plan that well, but it's just like, it's not even that it took him much effort to break that door. You know what I mean? He almost walks through it.
It's a perfect plate too. It's a perfect square that gets knocked out as he walks through it.
And this is so fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
I think the fact that it's daytime and it's just sort of ordinary house makes it much scarier, you know?
Yeah.
And he keeps repeating, why'd you do it? Why'd you do it? And this is the tactic that people take, which is to go to the opposite direction, but isn't a good tactic with the crazy person.
I fucked all of them. What do you want me to say?
What do you mean you fuck? Who'd you fuck?
I fucked all of them. Tommy, Salvi, your brother. Oh, I sucked your brother's cock. What do you want me to say?
Oh,
yeah. This is a woman at the end of her rope.
Yeah.
As we've said, she's been beaten, she's been abused, and so she's fighting back. She doesn't know what this is going to lead to. Although you could argue that she should have suspected, but she's trying to stand her ground and push back against a horribly abusive human being. And her saying this stuff is a way of just kind of, I don't know, trying to find her own humanity again and being willing to be so gross with it and open with it, so that she in a way tries to short circuit his anger, you know, because he's just going to keep asking till he gets and asks specifically. I'm sure she's been through this a number of times, that when he's jealous of her, he just goes through the different body parts of what she might have touched or done, right? And she's just so sick of it, and now she's just fighting back. And I love this. I love the fight back. I don't like what it leads to, but I love that she pushes back on him, you know.
I'm going to say 2 things that sound like the polar opposite. But the first is, Vicky's an incredibly strong character. I mean, like, that she doesn't back down. She doesn't cower in fear ever in this film. Right. There's this person who's obviously abusive, has obviously hit her many, many times.
Yeah.
And she gets pushed to a certain point and then she fights back.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, like, having now been connected to multiple people in abusive situations, one of the things that I have learned in talking to them, and that is just so important, is that people will tend to, the victim of these situations will tend to obsess over what they did wrong. Oh, if only I hadn't said this. If only I hadn't done that. If only I'd done maybe things would be okay. And the thing that's so important to remember is, this person is a crazy person.
Yeah.
Yes, there are different choices that might have led in different directions.
Yeah.
But that person was still going to be abusive, because that is in their nature.
Yes.
There's nothing in this was your fault. Right. Nothing in this was because you did this. It's like when someone comes in and tries to accuses you of fucking his brother, which you didn't do. There is no right. There is no right answer that's going to make this okay. The person that it's broken through the door and has already hit you multiple times, they are the fucking problem in the situation. No decision you made is responsible for how you got there.
Yep, 100%.
But she continues to come at him. He slaps her again hard. And we already talked about this in the last episode of, like, these times where These do not seem like stage slaps. They do not seem real. I don't know what De Niro's conversations with Cathy Moriarty were. I don't know how she felt on the set. But I will say, in this moment, after those 2 hard slaps, there is a moment, I'm not saying she breaks character, but her eyes go to the camera. And I almost wonder if there was a moment of that was too hard. Maybe. But she stays right in it. And he storms out. She follows. Man, when she yells to him, talk about not backing down.
It's fucking cock bigger than yours, too!
Yeah, she's trying to fight back. She's trying to, short circuit him, but it doesn't work.
We're out on the street. She's following him. And, Joey lives only a few houses down. She calls him a sick animal. She jumps on his back. He throws her down behind a car and hits her. And I'm assuming there's a mattress or something there to protect her.
Let's hope so.
We get to Joey's house. I think it's an interesting choice that it starts with Joey scolding and physically threatening his own kid.
Yeah. It's a cycle of violence. I think he's making a commentary on the cycle of violence within his community, Scorsese. Yeah.
And Jake comes in with that rock hard, stubborn, intense look on his face. And what happens next is one of the most real violent scenes I've ever seen in cinema.
You can watch a person shoot machine guns and kill people off of in action films and kill people off of stuff and whatever, like you can watch all of that stuff in a movie and you can suspend disbelief and it doesn't affect you as much.
Yeah.
Right. But when you see something like this is a violence you may know in your life. This is a violence you may have experienced in your life, either personally or watched it happen with your parents or watched it happen with family members or friends. And it is unsettling to see it portrayed so honestly in a movie like this. And the way this is shot, because you see him coming. That's the thing. And this is so genius about Scorsese's framing of the camera. You see, as you said, Joey is berating his son for whatever is going on there about the food or whatever. He does not see Jake coming. We see Jake coming. We see him coming as like we're watching a nature documentary. We're screaming at the little gazelle or whatever it is, or the deer, to run from the oncoming lion. And we can't. And it's not going to hear us. Joey's not going to hear us. So the intended feeling Scorsese is trying to give us as an audience is that we are helpless to watch this animal. And what he is in this moment, no matter what he says later, punching the walls, is destroying his brother. And great performance from Pesci here. He's completely shocked, like, oh, what the, and then we see him just absolutely drag and demolish his brother, punch his wife, push off his brother's wife in a horrible, horrible display of his anger, which has been building throughout the whole movie. Like this slow build of this character becoming this extremely violent and abhorrent creature. And he does this here, and it's chilling, just absolutely fucking chilling, man.
Well, and we talk about, it's funny, the title Raging Bull, we haven't talked about very much.
Oh, yeah.
But as what kind of animal he is, Raging Bull makes a lot of sense because we've talked about this stubborn, straight ahead.
Yeah.
There's no guile, there's no, and the rage that is built. And it's funny, all the other violence that has been visited upon Joey by his brother has been controlled on some level.
Yeah.
So, he gave him a cheap shot. Yeah, De Niro broke Joe Pesci's rib in the ring in that one. That's all true.
Yeah.
There's no control here. It is perfectly possible that Joey might die in this scene.
100%.
And so just a little bit about the shooting. So Vicki and Teresa Saldana, who plays Lenore, are trying to drag De Niro off. And take one, Teresa Saldana is thinking of this as a movie fight. And so she is movie trying to drag Jake off and fails. And the take ends, and De Niro turns to her and says, "This is real. This is really happening. You cannot worry about hurting me."
Wow.
So take two, she ends up with big clumps of Robert De Niro's hair in her hands.
Whoa.
And still fails to get him off of Joe Pesci.
Of course.
Third take, she said, it was just full on. It was just real. It was just He's trying to beat up Pesci, and they, with all their strength, is trying to pull him off, and that is the take that's in the film.
Wow.
Yeah. I would never do that kind of filmmaking. I'm yeah.
So let's have this conversation. I was thinking about this over the weekend. And it may add time to our discussion here on this, but I was thinking this over the weekend.
You said we had to get it done in this part, so
it's true. It's true.
We're still only in the third scene of this part.
You say I would never do this, but
yes.
And I totally respect that. But I'm starting to change my mind about filmmakers who make certain decisions on set for certain scenes. And if the end result is a great movie, maybe the filmmakers aren't always wrong. Now, I'm not saying it's good to be physically abusive to anybody. I'm not advocating anything to that end. But everybody's different. And maybe De Niro needs it to be like this in order to deliver the performance he's trying to deliver. And so it's a matter of what works for the actors on set and what they're comfortable with. Judging from the outside is certainly our right, but within it, it may have been the right decision because maybe a more respectful, how can I say this? More respectful, understanding director maybe doesn't get that performance out of the actor for this particular movie or that particular movie, what have you. So I was just thinking about it over the weekend as I was driving around thinking about things and conversations we've had in the past, because I don't always want to go after directors anymore on the show who are not overtly abusive. And not that we have in any way, but I mean, sometimes we've talked about certain things directors have done that we haven't enjoyed. So I'm starting to change my mind about that a little bit. Just saying.
You might be surprised to hear I basically agree 100% with you.
Oh, great.
I totally agree. So I'm saying that I would never do this.
Right. You're not saying it's wrong.
Yeah, let's imagine for the moment that I am just as talented in every single way as Martin Scorsese, which I am 100% not. But let's imagine that I was.
Let's do it.
Do you think, knowing my personality, with all this talent bursting out of me,
yeah,
Steve Morris, as a human being, would be capable of making a film like Raging Bull?
Is that Steve Morris, arrogant Steve Morris from years ago?
No. I'm saying Steve Morris today, bursting with talent.
I don't think so.
No, I could never make this film. Never. But I don't have this film.
But arrogant Steve Morris, I think, could have made this film.
I don't think so, because because I'm not in touch. I have a sensibility, and I can only use my talent to service a certain kinds of sensibility. There are other, it's like, I would hope, like, maybe I would hope I could make a film like Lawrence of Arabia, or I could make a film like Remains of the Day, or I could make but I could never, ever, ever make Raging Bull. I couldn't make Taxi Driver. That's not who I am, and so if the actors,
yes,
if there is not abuse and all the actors say, I want to fucking go here.
I
want to go full on, and I'll give two examples, one of which is truly horrific and one of which really, really fucking bugs me.
Okay.
The one that really fucking bugs me is what we talked about in Inglourious Bastards, where Quentin Tarantino felt that the only way to get the real choke was for him personally to really choke his actress.
Agreed.
I just think that's fucked up on so many levels.
100%.
And particularly the power dynamic, and did she really have a choice, and how did it feel, and how does Quentin Tarantino know how hard to choke or not choke? Pissed me off. The other one that's truly horrific is Last Tango in Paris, with Marlon Brando forcibly raping, essentially on camera, an actress who didn't know that was going to happen.
Yeah.
That is so those are, but there are other aspects where if Diane Keaton and Al Pacino agreed that she should really hit him, and if they, and despite the fact that it hurt, they really are happy with it, I'm okay. I'm actually totally okay with that.
Yeah.
Like I've done martial arts for a long time and gotten punched in the fucking face and been bleeding. And that was cool. You know what I mean? Like, that's because I'll tell you really brief. I'll see if I can tell the story really quickly, and maybe I'll cut this out.
Okay.
I was doing martial arts with my friend Jeff, who I did martial arts with more than anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And I could never do a jumping, spinning wheel kick. This is back in my youth when I was in good shape and thin and all this stuff. And finally, my sensei said, Steve, reckless abandon, which meant don't worry about whether or not you're going to get hurt. Because in order to do this kick, to jump in the air, spin around, throw this high kick, you have to commit fully. And I did the kick, and it was awesome. I was like, oh, wow. Then we're punching each other and blocking one day. And we're doing, this guy and I had done martial arts together forever. We're doing it the way we always did it. And the sensei said, guys, reckless abandon, which meant punch as hard as you can and really try to hurt the other person.
Wow.
And we did that, and neither of us hit each other, and our arms were all bruised, and was like, whoa, that was crazy. Then we're on a belt test. I think Jeff was testing for his black belt, and I was testing for a brown belt, and we were sparring. And there's no human on earth I'd sparred with more than Jeff. And we're doing that, and then the sensei says, guys, reckless abandon, which meant,
wow,
really try to hurt each other.
Wow.
I have no memory of the sparring session. It's probably the best martial arts I'd ever done in my life. And it was like, we were both bruised. We had bruises all over our bodies that we didn't notice at the time. And it was like, whoa, that's an amazing experience.
Yeah.
This scene in this movie, and I think I will keep that story in, this is reckless abandon. This is going, I don't care if I get hurt. We're all going to jump into this. We're going to go full on because it's worth it to make this scene real. And I admire that, but I would never do this as a director.
Yeah.
You know,
fair point. Fair point.
The final moment in the sequence is that Vicky pulls Jake off and he clocks her.
Yeah.
And she goes down unconscious. It is extremely disturbing.
Yeah.
At the end of the scene. And of course, the last moment is the kids just standing there watching what has happened.
Yeah.
So in addition to this being an absolutely crazy and violent and disturbing scene, I discovered something as I was doing my research, because as I mentioned to you, one of the commentary tracks is with Jake LaMotta.
Yes.
And so for those of you listening, I sent this section of commentary track to John because I found it so bewildering and upsetting and real. And I've never heard anything like this on a commentary track. So let me just ask you first off, what was your reaction to Jake LaMotta talking over this sequence?
I had like 175 different thoughts as I was listening to him talk about this, because he does not address what is happening in the scene. And so like in a direct way, in terms, because he's asked, by the way, shout out to the guy who was doing the commentary with him. I hope they paid him 4 times what people get paid to do that, because he was shepherding Jake through this and had to listen to Jake's commentary on this, and the tirade he goes into here is just really astounding, because I get his, let me say this, I get his logic, because he's an old man when he's making this commentary. And so he's not going to he's not going to straight up say, yes, I beat my wife up all the time. Right. I mean, because there's something different between seeing something in a movie and then having people talk about it in a biography and then having you actually say it. Right. There's difference in that way. There's buffers that you can go through with other things. But if you actually say it, you've kind of shut down all the buffers and you've admitted it. So he diverts the attention away here in a fascinating way, because what he's saying basically is he's not talking about Joey in a way, Joe, he's talking about the people who have been around Vicky, and that there was karma for these people who've been around Vicky, and that when she gets around these people, they soiled her, they denigrated her.
She was a mother, and a good mother, and a great wife, until these rotten, effing people that are in this world came along and put stories in their head.
So he's coming from the place of, in his warped perception of this, respect and love for his wife, and talking about her being a young person, 15, 16 years old, and then goes into all these people who manipulated her and abused her and all this kind of stuff. And he wants karma for those people, that they haven't paid the price for abusing poor Vicky, while amazingly avoiding talking about himself being abusive of her and any karma that's coming to him. So I find this all to be I found it to be a fascinating 4.5 minutes or almost 5 minutes of lists of commentary in a very brutal scene from the movie.
I mean, I've listened to a lot of commentary tracks because of doing this show. And a commentary track is a really weird, I won't even call it an art form. It is and it's not exactly a sales pitch, but it is sort of, we are here to perform this role, which is that and they take on different forms sometimes. We're informing you about the film, but there's something very false isn't exactly the word, but it's a certain kind of performance. I'm here doing this job.
Yeah.
And I've never heard, although I've heard people get emotional in a commentary track, I've never heard anybody lose it before. And he loses it.
Because you're thinking wrong. You're thinking wrong. And if you're thinking wrong, no matter what you get away with, you're going to pay.
I think everything you said is exactly what's happening. But I actually think the base of it is in fact him saying, I have gotten the bad karma from my choices. I think the pain of it is coming from this place of, look at where I am. Look at everything I have lost because of everything I've done. But the mechanism by which he's saying it is just what you said of they're going to get their comeuppance. It's all coming for you. You don't get away with anything in this. It is really, really, really weird.
I think you're just a kinder person in approaching these things. So you're defaulting to
him taking some guilt.
Yes, you're defaulting. Oh, he must be feeling guilty. He just doesn't want to talk about it. No, I think this guy is completely out there and Looney Tunes from all the punches he took, and probably wasn't that smart of a guy to begin with. And so he's just going on a tangent. And Steve, you and I have dealt with people as they get older. All of a sudden, these random tangents pop up that have nothing to do with what's actually going on. But in their minds, they've made some kind of tenuous connection, and they've allowed themselves to go down into the wormhole. But maybe you're right. Maybe it is about guilt and karma for himself. But it seems like he's very much focused on other people and has gone off on some tirade here against all the people who were around Vicky at that time.
Well, and this is what it just adds one more layer to the weirdness of this movie of like, we've seen lots of movies that are, based on a true story, but none like this. Yeah. And certainly none where the character had so few redeeming qualities and was so difficult and so obsessive. And then to listen to the actual guy and go, yeah, this guy he's not necessarily the same guy as Robert De Niro, but this guy is the raging bull, man. This is what he is.
A lot of people don't know that because they're greedy and they think wrong and they're unhappy for it because they will suffer. They will suffer.
After this incredibly violent sequence with Joey and with Vicky getting knocked out, we cut back to that static TV set and Jake just staring dead-eyed straight ahead. And then Vicky walks in and goes upstairs. We see a huge bruise on her chin. Huge. This is, a professional fighter just clocked her. Yeah. Jake enters, sees the suitcase and that she's packing. It is a super scary scene. And the bravery of Vicky just to come back here, I think, is kind of amazing. And he touches her arm and she's just ignoring him and packing.
Honey, look, I'm a bum without you and the kids. Don't go.
And he kind of puts his arms around her. And it's very reminiscent of their first scene in the bedroom.
Yep.
It very much has the same feeling. There's like a long look and he hugs her and then she hugs him. By the way, there was originally a whole bunch of dialogue in the scene and they realized they didn't need it, which I 100% agree with.
Yeah.
And it's like that moment in the Copa where she says, no, I love him. And Joey goes, you love him? Because she does love him. And you see it here. And it's so painful because you want her to escape.
Yeah. And Vicky has said this a number of times that she really did love him. Amidst the abuse, amidst all that stuff, she really did love him. And you can say, an abusive relationship, codependent relationship, people fool themselves into what they're feeling. I guess you can, of course, that's very valid and probably true most of the time. But when I read the stuff about her and when I read her responses to stuff, it seems very clear that she did love him. And that these abusive elements, if he could not have these abusive elements, they probably would have gone to have a very successful marriage, a very loving marriage. But these are the things that came with that, because she says, I wish the film had shown more of the good times of our relationship, because we did really have a lot of good times, but the film hardly shows that other than that montage scene. And so, she said it made it seem as if I just kept coming back waiting to get abused, and that's not what happened. So, but I do think for this film, this scene is very poignant. Again, the way Scorsese frames it and places the camera on, like in the corner of, it's almost like we're a child watching our angry father sitting there in the recliner, watching the television, which I think is on static, as you said.
Yeah.
And then we see our mother come through the door, who we witnessed getting knocked out.
Yeah.
Right. And so, because the way the angle is of the shot, it's like we're smaller. And so we're watching, and it's scary. It's very noirish as well with the lighting and what have you. But it's scary to see her walk back into the lion's lair. And then, she, as you said, calmly goes upstairs and packing. But seeing him convince her to stop packing and convince her to stay is almost scarier than him just beating up Joey. It's almost as scary because of our fear for what might be coming next for her, you know?
Well, and again, I just keep saying the same thing, but having witnessed abusive relationships, the abuse, if there's enough abuse, the person will leave.
Yes.
It's that hug in the bedroom after that convinces them to stay. That's why it's scarier.
Yep.
We're back in another fight, and this is one that Jake is losing. It's the 15th round. He hasn't really done anything. He's about to lose his middleweight championship, and then at the very last minute, he just starts coming back. And they go like, oh, he's been playing possum. And LaMotta just destroys this guy.
Yeah.
And then in this slow motion punch, knocks out the mouth guard. And the way he falls and his head hits the ropes, which honestly made me think of $1 Million Babies. It scared me a little bit.
Yeah.
But like, it is absolutely brutal. And this is true that he, in the last 13 seconds of a round, he managed to make one of the most remarkable comebacks in all boxing history.
Two things. One, this round is available on YouTube. You can watch this round. It's really incredible to see what happens. Second, the reason he is fighting this person, and they allude to it by the announcer in the film, is because Marcel Cerdan, who he had beaten for the title, was due for a rematch, but died in a plane crash. I think either coming to the fight or going in France somewhere. At the time, he was Edith Piaf's lover.
Oh, wow.
And the stories are that she never recovered from his death.
Wow.
So what a crazy world where Edith Piaf is somehow connected to Jake LaMotta through this person, Marcel Cerdan. So an interesting tidbit in the history, the footnotes of Jake LaMotta's life.
It's after the fight, and Vicky is trying to convince him to call Joey.
Yeah.
And he keeps arguing. Finally, she says, like, I'll dial him. He goes into the phone booth. He sits down. We hear Joey answer. Jake doesn't speak. And Joey says,
Salvi, this ain't funny anymore. Is it you? I know somebody's there. I can hear you breathing.
You listening? Your mother sucks fucking big fucking elephant dicks. You got that?
I feel like you enjoy saying certain lines from movies.
I do. It's true. Well, you know what? It's funny, too, because there's some lines that I feel I say better. And some lines I feel I say just terribly. Because those are
usually the ones you replace with the actual voice.
Yeah. Well, if I said it, or if you said it really well, or Mance relished saying Captain Kirk lines on Enterprise Incidents, if it was great of us doing it, I'll put it in. If it's better of them doing it, I'll put it in. It just depends.
But what do you think at this moment? Do you think the way this is done, do you think that like he's stopped being abusive? Like, have you fooled yourself that he's a better person now, that he's really kind of asking Vicky for forgiveness? No, right.
No, of course not. No, I haven't. Maybe other people have. I mean, I certainly, this is the classic, I don't have the guts to say something on the phone. It's also interesting that it doesn't occur to Joey that this could be his brother calling him.
Right.
Only thinks that, and it also makes me go, how many times has Jake called him and hung up? I think a lot.
Oh, yeah. Probably a lot.
There's a slow motion shot, and this is one of the moments that led Scorsese to wanting to do the movie, which is we see he's in the corner at a fight, and they squeeze this bloody sponge over him. Wow. And we hear this rumbling, and they sponge his belly, they clean his face. And Marty saw this in one of the fights and saw the bloody sponge, and it made it seem like the blood of Christ. It made it seem like a ritualistic sacrifice.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And we're back with the fight with Sugar Ray Robinson.
Round number 13, the hard luck number. There's the buzzer, and I think you know both the boys.
And there's incredible slow-mo of both Jake and Robinson getting up, and Robinson is jabbing and hurting LaMotta, and LaMotta is just holding on. And he gets hurt, and then he just starts yelling.
Yeah.
Come on!
And then this is the technique, we saw it recently in Goodfellas, we saw it in Vertigo, we saw it in Jaws, is the Zolly, which is where you're pushing in with the camera and zooming back with the lens, or zooming in with the lens and pulling back with the camera, but it distorts it. And this is a really short, really slow one on Ray standing there. This last sequence of the beating in round 13 of this fight, Martin Scorsese worked out in minute detail in advance. He says that it is I don't see this. This makes no sense to me what I'm about to say, but this is what Scorsese says. He says it was worked out specifically in reference to the shower sequence in Psycho.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to have to like look at them side to side. I haven't done that. I don't understand what the hell he's talking about, but he said it multiple times.
Okay.
And we're looking at Sugar Ray and the sound goes out and he's in this incredible 1-point perspective shot. And then we push in on Jake preparing himself. And it's just, there's no sense of a fight anymore. There's only a sense of a beating. You know what I mean? That Jake's just standing there ready to take a beating. What the real Jake LaMotta says is in that this moment, the voice in his head, he was telling himself to go down. He wanted to go down, but he couldn't make himself do it.
Wow.
He said he had too much pride. And Ray comes in and just pummels him. And really for me, it's the shot of Jake's hand as he grabs the rope and holds on. And the blood is everywhere. It's way beyond realism now. We see Vicky reacting to it. Apparently the shot of her reacting is taken from a Time magazine photo of this moment.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jake is holding himself up by the ropes. Incredible shot of Ray in that smoky environment. And you mentioned this shot before of him lifting up his hand. And Jake knows what's coming. And Vicky looks up. There's a huge punch and blood splatters the judges. I mean, we've entered in a world that we've never seen before, I think. Yep. And as we hear, no one can endure this pummeling. It just goes on and on until finally the ref steps in and stops the fight.
Yeah.
By the way, what Jake said here is that cutting weight had taken away so much of his strength, he literally just couldn't even lift his arms up. So he just stood there and took it.
Yeah.
At the end of the fight, he turns and he's just covered in blood.
Yeah.
And he goes to Sugar Ray and says,
"Never went down, Ray. You never got me down, Ray. You hear me? Never got me down."
He is LaMotta's executioner, in essence.
Yeah.
And it is time for Jake to pay the piper. And that is the fight that you see. And I didn't look for this one on YouTube, but I imagine it's on there. To me, that moment when he comes there and says that to Ray speaks volumes about Jake LaMotta's character, right? These empty victories in a moment like this when you've been destroyed. But I love the characterization of him trying to pull up his shorts, like he's wearing belts on his pants. And maybe that's a great kind of he's out of it moment that he thinks, like he's wearing pants instead of his boxing shorts. But either way, I just love that the way that's shot and the way that's displayed about his character, that he holds on to this useless pride of like, you never knock me down. Who cares? I just kicked the shit out of you and took the fucking belt. Who cares if you're down or you're up, right? But it's these ridiculous stances that people take in certain moments in order to still feel like they did something instead of accepting the loss, right? So that's what we see from Jake.
What's so weird to me, I agree with all of that, except that if you think about Rocky, the whole thing in Rocky is I just want to go the distance.
Right.
And it's almost exactly the same thing, except that the setup of the two movies are completely opposite.
Right.
So Rocky going the distance, we go, you're a hero. That's amazing. Yep. And I'm sobbing because of the courage and the character and all that stuff.
Right.
And in Jake saying, you never got me down, I'm just going, you poor, stupid, stubborn, abusive fool, And yet the thing that you know what, this sums up so much of movie making to me or storytelling is people go like, it's the thing they did. Oh, I'm going to film a movie about a guy who never goes down. No, that's not the point.
Right.
It's all the setup. It's all how we feel about it that the film is creating.
Yeah.
The thing they do is very similar. The films are totally different.
Yeah. 100% agreed.
And I'm sure you feel this too, as we're rounding up at the end and, making the announcement and watching Jake. The shot of the scene is as the camera pans along the ropes to the blood dripping off that rope.
This is Scorsese showing off a little bit. I mean, and in retrospect is what I say that.
Oh, sure.
Because at the time, of course, he is making a commentary about how bloody boxing actually is. which a lot of people don't talk about, right? Like I was rewatching When We Were Kings, which of course we did on the show very, very early. I think it's our second episode.
I think it's our second episode, yeah.
And I was watching it the other night on Pluto TV, as I love to bring up, because I'm getting paid by them, I guess. But like I was watching an hour the other night, and I'm like, yeah, none of that stuff is talked about. The blood, it's all about the sweat flying everywhere, blah, blah, blah. But the blood itself is rarely talked about in boxing. But in this moment, he is showing you the bloody nature of boxing. But it's a little bit like he's overdoing it by showing us this focus on the blood on the ropes, And it's, again, like you said, it's the religious thing, right? This is the blood, in essence, like the blood of Christ. Like he's been crucified in essence, right? And even though this is not a guy that has anything connected to Christ in his behavior or demeanor, but it has that imagery of the blood on the ropes there that is almost like the rat going across the railing at the end of Departed, which is a little too much at times. So that's my feeling on it when I look at it now. Whereas when I first saw the movie, I was like, wow,
So I think the blood on the ropes, the splattering of the judges, I think all of them go too far. But again, this is what's so funny. Is I'm just going to say the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I, as a filmmaker, would never do that.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That doesn't. Exactly.
But like, this is like, I want Martin Scorsese, particularly at this era, to follow his vision.
Oh, sure.
You know what I mean? Right. But it is definitely, I'm pointing something out here.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to cut to one of the most radical transformations of a character ever seen in film. And it's particularly radical because it is entirely not fake. We cut to, it's 1956 Miami. By the way, this was shot in a house in San Pedro. We never went to Miami. We see beautiful cars in the driveway, and we hear an interview going on, and there is Jake LaMotta sitting out by the pool, shirt off, in a lounge chair, being interviewed, and he is 60 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
And there were jokes about this made throughout the 80s of this, transition. It was talked about a ton.
Yeah.
Some people think it's a stunt. By the way, he took several months. I think it's 5 months they stopped shooting. Yep. They paid the crew for the whole time, which is amazing. Just we want to keep the same crew. Can you imagine getting paid for months while the lead actor just got fat?
This is why crews are loyal to their directors when the directors take care of them, man.
And everything I've heard is that the first week or two of him trying to put on pounds was tons of fun.
Yeah.
Just eating whatever the hell he wanted, as much as he wanted. And after that, it wasn't fun at all.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of conversations and stuff that I've read about like things he didn't anticipate, like the rubbing together of his thighs, the chafing that happens for people of a certain size. Not everyone, obviously, but certainly.
I'm familiar with it.
Was okay, right? Yeah. All the things that he experienced with all of that, the loss of energy, the loss of breath, all of that as it was happening, because you're not supposed to do this to your body in such a quick amount of time, Yeah.
And the thing is, even with modern technology and CGI and all that stuff today, great makeup, whatever, real looks real.
Yeah.
And this it is shocking. I mean, we saw him at the very beginning of the movie, but seeing him now with the shirt off, he looks absolutely terrible in an amazing way, I would say. And he's given an interview about, he's done with boxing. He's, always had to cut the weight. He's got his house. He's got his kids. We see Vicky and the kids are playing at the pool. And everybody, it seems like, hey, this is like a happy guy now.
That's what we think. Yeah.
I think it's great. He picked the right time to stop fighting. He's home with us all the time now. Yeah, man. It's really good.
You know what? You notice that Jake hasn't changed. We may have been deluded that he's because we're not seeing him beat up Vicky in every scene now from that point forward. She's answering the question, and then he interrupts her and then says, "You finished? Are you finished?" And then goes forward. So you can tell by her performance that there is still this fear around offending him or pissing him off, because he may hit her or whatever. And then he tries to get all the family together for that picture, and you can tell they're all not 100% comfortable doing this, and that he's ruling by fear. So I just wanted to say, like, that you can still sense that there's this perpetual fear that's going on with everybody involved in his family life.
I just bought a club on Collins Avenue. It's a bar, package store, everything. That's what I'm gonna call it.
All right, I don't know. What are you gonna call it?
Take a guess.
And we hear the snare drum, and then we see the big neon sign at Jake LaMotta's. And now we're at Jake's, and he is the MC up there with his microphone telling jokes. The club is very popular. And I just don't what's so weird about this, and I don't know how you feel, is like we've had this intensely violent build to him beating up on Joey, him hitting Vicky, his loss to Sugar Ray.
Yeah.
And then we just leave all that behind. And now it's like a decade later or more. And he's this big fat guy who's this MC at this club telling bad jokes. How do you feel at this moment, at this transition?
Well, I think this transition works. And I'm not always the biggest fan of jumping transitions. You know, we've been doing our 10 days of Oscars. One of the biggest complaints I have with Maestro is how they jumped in time to transition this relationship without giving us what leads to this change in the relationship. They just change the relationship and you have to deal with it. Whereas here, I think we've established Jake firmly enough in his situation, and we've had enough time after the beating up of Joey with him trying to call him, or him, or his Vicky calling Joey on the phone, and Jake trying to maybe say something but couldn't quite get it out. And he's fought these fights, so we've had time. So when we make the jump here, it's clearly over after the Ray fight, and so we're seeing the post middleweight championship life. Right, he's now heavier. He's had the conversation out there by the pool, and now he's running a club. So to me, it's like, this makes sense from the kind of boxer that he was. And it's pathetic, honestly, to see him up there doing what he's doing and saying the things that he's saying. And as a performer, watching someone who's very, very green as a performer up on that stage, you're just kind of, you feel pity for him, even though he's a pretty abhorrent dude. So
it just goes to show of like, there is a minimum level of skill and charisma and ability to be in front of an audience.
Yeah.
That if you saw this guy come in for an audition, hey, I want to be the MC at this club, you would say, no.
Yeah, no.
You can't do this job. It's only that he's famous that he's allowed to do it. And we get back sort of at the end of this long monologue of poorly told, poorly written jokes that kind of hit, because he does seem popular at this club. I will say that.
Sure. Yeah.
Is that we get back to the poem he did at the beginning of, you know, I'm no Olivier, but if he fought Sugar Ray, he would say that the thing ain't the ring, it's the play, that ends with, and everyone kind of joins in to the signature line of and he goes off and starts working the room, and he ends up sort of at this table with this state attorney general and starts talking to him, and he's there with his wife, and as he leans in to kiss her, he knocks over her drink, and it's all so awkward and uncomfortable, and he makes awkward and uncomfortable jokes. It's I don't know, I find it very rough to watch.
Yeah, it is tough, and it shows you like how he is still the raging bull. Like he just still bores in and breaks things even when he's trying not to be, because he can't help himself. And then making those comments that he makes, which doesn't help his situation either. I think this is an element that leads to what happens to him in the club with those girls in a few minutes.
Well, that's where we're going to go right now, because there's this beautiful blonde, and the waitress said there's a problem, and she says,
well, there's really not a problem. She doesn't look 21, so I just had to ask for some idea.
How old are you? 21. Can you prove that you're 21? Prove it to me.
And she leans in and lays a long, big kiss on Jake's lips.
Any girl that can kiss like that can drink at my joint anytime.
And then he turns to her friends, asks how old they are, asks them to prove they're 21, and they all kiss Jake LaMotta.
Yeah.
It's, knowing where this movie goes, this is very uncomfortable. I mean, it's weird and uncomfortable anyway.
Yeah.
But it's also the thing of celebrity, you know, like he is a celebrity. These underage women want to be or girls want to be in this bar. And so they do what they do.
Yeah. But here's the thing. And I think this is so important to notice or to note is that here he is making out with 3 different teenage girls. This is the last guy, a guy who married a 16-year-old. This is the last guy who should be judging who should be in his club and not be in his club. He's clearly feeling himself, you know. Now he's got a successful club. He thinks he's doing fine. He's just met the state's attorney general, whoever that was there. And so he thinks he can get away with murder now. He's got that confidence, that ego. And this is the same guy who beat up his brother because he fantasized that Vicky was having sex with him but it's okay for him to make out with 3 girls at his club. Like, this is the kind of patriarchal hypocrisy that you see all the time. And certainly he is a massive example of that. Because if Vicky had kissed 3 teenage boys, or guys, each one, Jake would have lost his motherfucking mind and set the bar on fire. So there's the difference there in his stubborn sexism in how he approaches this situation.
It's funny. You and I on the Outlaw Nation channel are in the middle of doing our spoiler reviews of Shogun.
Yeah.
And when I read that book as a kid, one of the things that hit me so strongly was it doesn't have the break of as much the way Shogun presents it as men are like this and women are like this. James Clavell is like, no, women want sex and are interested in this stuff just as much as men. There's no difference in that. So this behavior of like this double standard that we see here is one that I've always reacted against.
Yeah.
We cut to the very famous shot of him pouring the champagne into the tiers of champagne glasses, which is fascinating to watch. And this is, I think this moment, this is the height of post-boxing Jake LaMotta.
Yeah.
He's got his own club. It's very popular. He's the center of the party. He's having a great time. And then we cut to where you see things start to fall apart, which is, and by the way, the morning after you've been up all night in the club never looks good. Nope. It's always a rude awakening when you step out into the sunshine, you know?
Yeah.
And he steps outside and there's Vicky at the car looking stern and she won't let him in.
I'm leaving you, Jake.
All right, what else?
No, I mean it this time. I didn't want to tell you till I had everything worked out.
And he's trying to get in the car.
Yeah.
And I love her response.
Why? So you put your hands on me?
Open the door.
No.
Come on, honey, open the door.
No, look, Jake, I got a lawyer. We're getting a divorce, and I'm getting custody of the kids.
The strength that she has, having made this decision and is ready to go, is great. And he's really trying to get in the car, reaches in towards her, and she just drives away, leaving him all alone.
Yep. Yeah. It's not as powerful as Tina Turner leaving Ike Turner in What's Love Got to Do with It, but it's still a pretty powerful moment for her to stand her ground, know exactly how much to open the window, wait for him. God knows how long she's been out there in that car. And, or maybe Jake called her, I don't know, to pick him up. And so I don't know how she's there, but like maybe she waited all night or waited a few hours. But either way, she's there and she delivers this hammer blow to Jake and just drives off. No fear anymore. You know, and you know this about women. Once they cross a certain line, there's no going back. And she's clearly crossed that line finally after all the abuse and all the damage. And she stayed across that line. You know, as I said, I've read a number of interviews with her, read some excerpts from her book. Jake tried until his very last breath to get her back, or her last breath to get her back, and never could. And she never gave in again. Even though she still cared about him, she still was kind to him, she never indulged the idea of being with him ever again, which drove him insane.
We cut to Jake. He's asleep and sweaty, just looking terrible in bed. And we hear these voices. We don't see who it is, and it is the cops.
But what do you want? For what?
And they show pictures. And it is the girl who was the blonde in the fancy dress, and then her school photograph next to it.
You recognize this girl? She been in the club?
This is the same girl?
Yeah.
And I fully believe that Jake LaMotta in this film had no clue how old this girl was. Never thought about it until this moment.
Yeah.
She says you introduced her to some men.
I introduced her to men. I introduced a lot of people to a lot of people. You tell me I introduced her to men. I introduced him to men. But I don't say nothing.
She's 14. Come on, put on your shoes, Jake.
And I think he's just reeling with that information that she's yeah. And I love that because he's just not processing what's about to happen to him, that he shows the picture to him. He's like, do you think she looks 14? We cut to Vicky's house. There's a knocking on the door. It's Jake. Vicky doesn't want to open it, worries that he's drunk. And he says,
Vicky, open the door. I'm out on bail. I just got to pick up one thing and I'll leave. I promise.
Kids are sleeping.
I won't bother them. Let me just get something.
So she lets him in. He goes straight to that middleweight championship belt.
I got to get $10,000. My lawyer says if I can spread $10,000 around, I can get the case dropped.
Yeah, but they don't have a case against you.
No.
Which, to be very clear, he's not talking about paying his lawyer to fight the case in court.
No.
He's talking about spreading around some bribes so he doesn't have to go to court.
Yeah.
And as they're talking, he starts grabbing some tools and pulling the jewels off the belt, which, knowing where this movie goes, is just, it's not the most tragic thing in the movie. It's not the saddest thing in the movie. There are things way worse than this, but it is still just like, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you doing?
Well, can't you get the money from your friends?
And I think this line is really telling.
Yeah, what friends?
Do you think he has any friends? Anyone he could trust in his life at all? I don't
100%
think so.
no. 100% no. He's got, because guys like this or celebrities like this, they always have hangers on, but once the shit hits the fan, they all fucking disperse.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what I think. I think there were people around him who would use him and be nice to him for the ability to use him for the access.
Yeah.
But no, I don't think he had any friends. Well, and who wants to be fucking friends with Jake LaMotta, to be honest? You know, from what we've seen in this film, this is not a guy I want to hang out with.
No.
And he starts hitting the belt harder, and she's worried she's going to wake the kids. And then there's this moment, but when he hammers on this belt, that the dishes on the shelf in the foreground fall.
What's the matter with you? Don't you put the dishes so they don't fall down?
Well, that was an improv because those dishes fell by accident. That was just the thing that happened in the scene.
Seems like.
And then we have a hard cut to him with the pawn shop or whatever.
What about the belt, Mr. LaMotta? Yeah, isn't that what you wanted to tell me, the championship belt?
Yeah, these are the jewels from the belt.
Yeah, but where's the belt? The belt of a champion is a very rare item.
What?
And so originally he thought he was going to get 10 grand for this belt, and now his top is $1,500.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not the biggest tragedy of this film, but it just makes me go, it is heading towards a bottom.
But it is an interesting moment that is a window into him, right? Because in his mind, he's like, I'll take the jewels out, but I got to keep the belt. I earned the belt. The jewels aren't mine. The jewels are put in by the other people or by the Federation, whatever. But the belt, I don't want to give up the belt. And
you know, you're right.
Right? I mean, I think that's what it is. And so that's why he takes the jewels out, thinking that he can get a little bit of something for that. But the belt itself, he probably thinks isn't worth much, but it's worth a lot to him, you know. But he finds out quickly that isn't the case.
And he makes a phone call explaining that he couldn't raise the money, and which ends with,
"The fuck him, I'll do what I gotta do."
And then we have this hard cut to Jake in jail, just struggling with all he has against these guards who are about to put him in solitary.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure most of you listening would not be surprised, these are real prison guards. And they did a rehearsal with De Niro, and it was kind of at half speed. And they sort of went, okay, we understand how this is going to go. And they did not understand how this is going to go because De Niro, like he did in the scene where he attacks Joey, he went full on. And suddenly these real prison guards realized they were into this whole other thing. And what's interesting is that what it sounds like is there's this moment that they stopped acting and went back to being real prison guards.
Yeah.
Dealing with a dangerous prisoner. And he looks, I just have to say, De Niro at this moment, he looks dirty and fat and unhealthy and just gross in every way.
Yeah.
And it sounds like he really felt terrible at this point, you know, just putting on all the weight and everything.
The experience, yeah. People don't know. It's not, putting on the weight doesn't come with like relaxed situation. Putting on weight really fucks with you mentally, fucks with you physically. There's a lot of things you go through, especially if you put it on so quickly. There's a lot of things you experience. So it's no surprise, you know, and I'm sure it added a desperate element to his performance that was essential in these last few scenes.
They finally get him into the cell. They close the door. He swears at them, you know, as they shut the door on him. And then I don't know what to say about this scene. I mean, first of all, it's mostly in the shadows. It's beautifully shot, beautiful contrast of light and dark. Originally, by the way, Paul Schrader wrote a 3-page monologue.
Oh, wow.
In which he goes through his entire life, realizes his mistakes, and expresses his regrets. Needless to say, that's not the direction we went. You could hear him breathing, and we're just with him for a while, and he moves over to this wall, and he puts his head against the wall, and then he hits his head against the wall, and he continues to hit his head against the wall and punch the wall while repeating. And then it goes into And I just, we talked about this when he was sobbing on his trainer's shoulder after throwing the fight. This is that to like 10 times more, of just the most human, unguarded, uncensored explosion of raw emotion, maybe more than has ever put on film, in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very poignant scene. And obviously, I think the scene in the Hurricane where Denzel's talking to himself in solitary as well, I think it's pretty, is like a cousin of this scene. And I think what's fascinating about this scene is the slow build. Just like a great monologue, there is a slow build here as he starts the banging of his head onto the wall. Like it's the beginning, the pulsating beat of the beginning of the monologue. And then as he gets deeper and deeper in the monologue and hits the real hard points, that's when you see him just absolutely losing. I'm not an animal, smashing his hands into that. And then I love the reaction after he's done with the pain all coming to him, because it's been adrenaline and anger that has masked the pain up until that moment. Now that is dissipated because he's exhausted himself with the punching, now he's left with the pain, right? And as I've said, I've been there. I've absolutely slammed my head into walls before in anger at myself or in anger at a situation. I've punched my face. I've punched my head in anger at times because I didn't want to punch a wall. I've punched walls and put holes in walls back during my military time. I know this anger. I know this frustration. I know this shame, this embarrassment. So the scene always carries an extra weight for me when I watch it because I've been there. And I bet a lot of people listening to us have been there, maybe not as violently as Jake experiences in this moment, but certainly emotionally or mentally, certainly in that place where you're asking these questions of why, because that's what he's asking himself. Why was he this stupid? Why? Like, I think Steve, what you wrote, what you said, that Schrader wrote a 3-page monologue. His whys are like, I am Groot. He is saying all this 3-page monologue with every why that comes out of his mouth. Because you can see that he's putting those levels in of why, like, why did I fuck up things with Vicky? Why did I fuck this up with my family? Why did I fuck this up with Joey? Why did I fuck this up with the club? Why did I fuck this up with this young girl? Why did I fuck up my life? Why am I fucking up my life? Why did I do this? And so it builds so that final moment when he can't punch anymore and he feels the pain of it all, because once again, he has caused himself pain by letting his anger get the best of him as he's punching the wall. It's not a punishment to himself. It's yet another example of how he hurts himself by his own behavior all the time.
I'm glad, by the way, you brought up the Hurricane, which is, by the way, a really good movie, and that scene is amazing. But the big contrast to me is the Hurricane is the story of an innocent man.
Yes,
this is 100%. The opposite. Is that and the reaction to the why of and the plaintiveness of him going,
why are you doing? Why? You're so stupid. You're so stupid. So fucking stupid.
And it hurts so much to hear it. And then this thing, because way in the beginning of the movie, Scorsese tells, I think it was the prop guy, to call Jake LaMotta an animal through the window to elicit an improv out of De Niro.
Yeah.
That's just something that Scorsese came up with on the set to get that reaction. But now we come back to,
Hey, call me an animal. I'm not an animal. I'm not an animal. Oh, you want to treat me like this? I'm not that bad. I'm not that bad.
And there's an emphasis there, I think, that's important, of like, he knows that he is bad.
Yeah.
But he wants to believe that he's not that bad. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, another element of the why can also be, as we've seen in other movies, why he's raging at God, right? Why did you give me this life? Why did you give me this anger? Why did you give me these parents who fucked me up? This dad who fucked me up? Why? He could be asking those questions as well, like asking of the universe or God, like, why? Why was this my lot in life? Why is this? Why do I have this anger? Why did you give this to me? Why? So there's so many ways you can read those whys that I think still all come back to Jake's feeling of helplessness. And I don't say that from a sympathetic point of view, but more from an analytical point of view, his helplessness about being able to stop his anger, being able to stop his self-destructive impulses. And And I just think it's such a phenomenal acting performance from De Niro, just that scene alone, which I think probably is what got him the nomination,
It's amazing. It's funny. I'm thinking about Hurricane with Denzel. I'm also thinking about Malcolm X with Denzel, which has another similar scene in Solitary. But in both of those cases, these are transition moments for growth in character.
Yeah.
That's not what I don't feel this is. Some people might interpret it this way, that he learns something here. He grows. But I don't think you or I feel that way, because I know what you said about it at the beginning. Yeah. And then we hear in this moment where he's just kind of breathing in the dark. And I love, by the way, that there are moments where he starts to move into the light.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he does not move into the light.
Right.
One other just small technical note is this wall is padded. So he's not actually punching concrete.
Thank God.
But you can't pad it that much.
Right.
Because if you make it really soft, then you can see you could see it move.
Yeah.
And so, although it is slightly padded, this really hurt. I mean, De Niro was bruised and banged up after the scene.
Yeah.
And then we hear voiceover pre-lap from the next scene of he's back being an MC.
Guy comes home, finds his wife in bed with another guy. The wife says, "Look who's here, Big Mouth. Not a whole neighbor'll know."
It's New York, it's 1958, and we see him in a club, except this is a very, very different club. Small bar, cramped space. He's making some jokes. Now he's getting heckled.
Yeah.
And he's angry. He's not where before he was at his club and he was really popular. Here, he's being tolerated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then he introduces the next act, which is Emma 48, because we realize that he's working at a strip club.
Yeah.
It's later on. He's outside with Emma, who obviously he has some kind of relationship with.
Yes.
And who does he see but Joey going into a bodega?
Listen, I'm gonna take a little walk. I got a couple of things I gotta take care of. All right?
Will I see you later?
Yeah.
And then he stands back to watch as Joey comes out. Here's what Scorsese's prep was for De Niro and Pesci in this scene. He didn't let them see each other for weeks. Wow. He made sure that they were totally separated. He didn't let them discuss the scene before they did it. He didn't rehearse the scene. He didn't let them run lines. This is the first moment that they saw each other after several weeks, and they went right into shooting the scene.
Wow.
Yeah. Which is smart. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Oh. Hey, what are you doing? Joey.
Pesci plays it perfect of realizing who's there and not engaging and continuing to walk.
Come on, Joey, why don't you turn around?
Heads into a garage. By the way, when we first see how they've aged Joe Pesci and his mustache, I was like, he totally looks like Tony Shalhoub. But
don't bother me.
He comes after him. Joey gets to the car, and he's just going to get in the car and drive away. He's not going to speak to him at all.
Totally. Yeah.
And he starts to get in, and Jake grabs him. I mean, you talked about this scene way back, I think, in our first part.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe what's happened because Jake's like trying to touch him and trying.
It's not a resolution scene. Again, I think people make the mistake of this movie that this is somehow closure for Jake or Jake's getting forgiven. He isn't, in a way, because Jake forces this to happen. Joey clearly doesn't want to talk to him. Joey's walking towards the car. And then when Joey gets in the car, Jake grabs the door and then grabs Joey and forces Joey to hug him.
Come on, you're my brother. Be friends. Brother. Yeah, you fucking bum. Give me a break. Come on.
That is not closure. If you force someone to confront you when you have wronged them, that is not fucking closure. So what we're seeing here is Jake yet again forcing people to do what he wants them to do because he needs something from them, right? Yep. And that's what he's doing in this moment. Now, I know it's between brothers, so you can add that element and context to it all. And certainly brothers sometimes are stubborn or resistant to resolving issues between each other for their own personal reasons. And certainly I've had that experience. But you can tell that this is something that he is forcing Joey to do. And Joey calls him out.
Wait, let me call my wife and kids. Do you want them to see the kids?
Oh, you're going to forgive or forget?
He's like, oh, yeah, really? You're sorry? You haven't called me? You haven't asked about your nephews and nieces? You haven't asked about anything, and now you're sorry? And, so Joey calls him out on everything. This isn't like, oh, my God, I'm so sorry. None of that, He's trying to force it and kiss him and do all this stuff instead of, like, really making amends.
Well, and just to be real clear, the one thing he doesn't say is, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Right.
I mean, like the last interaction he had with his brother was accusing him of fucking his wife and then beating the shit out of him.
Yeah.
You know, and now he's actually criticizing Joey.
Yeah.
For not making up with him, for not responding well.
It's a long time ago. Forget about it. Just give me a kiss. Come on.
And it's so. Yeah. I mean, it is not physical in the way that young Jake was physical with Joey, but it is still physically forcing him to hug and kiss. And then finally, some lie comes out about, oh, well, let's get the whole families together and then we'll make everything okay. And he's like,
You don't want to do this here. Come on. Let me call you. We'll get together in a couple of days.
You call me?
I will.
So I know that Joey is never going to call Jake.
Right.
Do you think that Jake even believes there's a chance he's getting a call from Joey at this moment?
Yes. I think Jake is so lost in his own stuff that I think he would actually believe that Joe is going to call him. Yes.
Well, it's just like you said that to the end of her life, he was trying to get back together with Vicky.
Yeah.
You know, like it's like he doesn't compare. Well, and that's where we go back to the why. And I'm not a bad guy. I'm not that bad.
Right.
I'm not that bad. Right. So Joey should want to get back together with Vicky. Should want to get back together. And the story you told about him asking Vicky, was I really that bad? And her saying, no, you were worse. Like he can't see it, you know. No. And it actually goes to what we were saying about the commentary track of like he's literally watching his avatar beat up his brother.
Yeah.
And he is not dealing with that thing. He can't look at it, you know.
Yeah. Even when it's happening, he's not saying, yeah, this happened. It was terrible. I'm so sorry. And whatever, like a real man of attrition. Like that's why I think it's different. Like when you look at someone like Mike Tyson, who clearly is aware of the terrible things he did when he was younger, he is so willing to accept responsibility and apologize and everything except for, of course, the rape, which I think he still claims he's innocent about. But everything else, like sticking up people, beating up people, all that stuff, like he is very open about it and very willing to accept responsibility and apologize for it, you know? And so I think there's the difference. And he learned from it. Clearly, you can see when you see Tyson now, this is a completely different person. It's not like George Foreman, who was a completely different person. Totally. But certainly there are elements of that when you see that with Tyson, but you don't see that with Jake. You really don't.
John, how would you feel about this evening's entertainment? An evening with Jake LaMotta featuring the works of Patty Chayefsky, Rod Serling, William Shakespeare, Bud Schulberg, and Tennessee Williams.
I don't know who was his agent, and I think the film drops the ball in not letting us meet Lefty Lazar, who was, I don't even know if that was his name, but that would be a great agent who got him these gigs and put that stuff up on the marquee. Like, it's a really smart way to book him because I think he was probably one of the first few boxers turned entertainers who actually toured and did these gigs. And the novelty act of watching a guy like this say literature on stage, I think, was part of the appeal to him, as well as being a champion. You know,
it's so crazy because none of these people are easy to speak. You know, like they're all like he didn't choose
Chayefsky for fuck's sake.
Yeah, he didn't choose easy stuff. Shakespeare. I mean, and we're back with him. We're in this room with the bare light bulb, and he's sitting there talking through his monologue. He's rehearsing.
Some people aren't that lucky, like the one that Marlon Brando played in On the Waterfront. An up-and-comer who's now a down-and-outer.
The choice that they're going to make to redo one of the greatest monologues from one of the greatest actors of all time who played a down-and-out boxer in a movie that dealt with mobsters and all this stuff is so bizarre. And if anyone, again, if I was I've complained about development executives, Hollywood executives many times. If they came to me and I was the executive, I would have said, you are crazy. Why would you do this?
It wasn't him, Charlie. It was you. You remember that night at the Garden? You came down my dressing room and you said, kid, this ain't your night. We're going for the price on Wilson. Remember that? This ain't your night.
What do you think about this choice?
Oh, I love it. I think this is De Niro, in a way, doing an homage to Brando, who was one of his heroes and idols as an actor. And so there must have been some really interesting meta stuff going on for him to do it, you know, because as you said, it's although he's a failed boxer, obviously, because of his brother in the movie, but, you know, quoting that line and the way he delivers it, I love it because, listen, just like we've talked about before, like, a good singer being able to sing terribly is very difficult, right? Like Meryl Streep and Florence Foster Jenkins, that is tough to do. And so a good actor acting bad or acting terribly, also very tough to do because it goes against your natural instincts in nature. right? And so to see him do the lines, but do the lines through Jake LaMotta, which means he's not going to imbue them with that kind of pathos that Marlon Brando did when he delivered those lines in On the Waterfront for Elia Kazan, is so great to show us the difference there.
I could have taken Wilson apart that night. So what happens? He gets a title shot outdoors in a ballpark, and what do I get? A one-way ticket to Palookaville.
Because ironically, he is a palooka. He is a loser. He is a guy who had it all, had the opportunity that Brando's character didn't have, and threw it all away.
I was never no good after that night, Charlie. It was like a peak you reach, and then it's downhill.
You know what Hollywood Story just reminded me of is that, and it was, again, one of our earliest films we did on the Cine-Files, in Young Frankenstein, Gene Wilder wanted to do Putting on the Ritz with the monster, and Mel Brooks thought the idea was so crazy that he said, no way, it's a terrible idea. And he did it in order to see how hard Gene Wilder would fight for it.
Yeah.
And when Gene Wilder got completely irate and was ready to walk off the movie, said, I won't do the movie unless you do this scene, Mel went, okay, great. I just wanted to see, now I know it's going to be the best scene in the movie. I just want to, and I'm not saying that they thought about that like this, but this is such a crazy choice.
Yeah.
And it is so good. It's so successful. By the way, they did 18 takes of this.
Oh my God.
All of them very different. And it sounds like De Niro, he had to work through a lot to find this and to get to where Marty wanted him to be. So there were really emotional takes. There were really intense takes. There were fast takes, sobbing takes, angry takes, all this stuff. And what Marty wanted, he wanted the coldest one. He wanted the simplest version possible so that the audience could interpret it how they wanted to interpret it.
Yeah, that's smart.
It took a long time to get there. And it's just, I'm just going to echo what you already said.
Yeah.
But the ability of one of the great actors to play a person who is not a terribly good actor, impersonating one of the great actors, that's like, triple level, that's a whole bunch of stuff.
And we should give Scorsese credit for this too. Now hearing your story about the 18 takes. So clearly he knew that he had to get De Niro through all these things and have him do all these takes so he could get to the take he wanted, right? And I think you were the one, weren't we talking about Nicholas Meyer and how like exhausting Shatner until he had no more takes to give is when you got the right take for him in Star Trek 2. And that's why he delivers such a damn good performance in that movie. So always when you talk about actors, you always got to talk about the great directors that work with them and know how to get the best performances out of them, because they're not always as good in other films. And it's because the directors are as good as the directors they work with in their great stuff,
Well, this is why it's a director and an actor is a really magical
100%
collaboration.
Yeah.
And understanding what the actor, because the job of the actor isn't to understand the whole thing and exactly what is required for this particular shot the job of the actor is to be there in that moment and be honest.
Yeah.
And so having a director who not only knows where they need to go or believes they know where they need to go, but then the hard part is knows how to help them get there.
Yeah.
That's the tough part. By the way, this brings us to a question from one of our patrons, Ryan Lieb, who says, I once saw a commercial that said in 1951, Marlon Brando changed acting with A Streetcar Named Desire. In 1980, Robert De Niro changed it again with Raging Bull. This is obviously a subjective statement, but has stuck with me throughout the years. And I'm curious, do you agree with it? And if so, what do you think about this performance that not only makes it one of the best of 1980, but possibly one of the best of 3 decades of film? And more specifically, what about it changed the way other actors approached the art?
Well, that's a great question. Well, with Brando was the method. He introduced the method, and that's where, and with Dean and others who used it. So that's why it was revolutionary back then. With De Niro, I think De Niro, as this, again, as I said in the first part, this film is the transition between the 70s into the 80s. And so what you saw De Niro deliver in this film, I think, inspired actors like Daniel Day-Lewis and all these great actors who understand how to live authentically in the moment. And even some of these actors who don't like break character while they're on set playing certain characters because of how they saw the commitment that De Niro gave to this character, gave to Jake LaMotta. I think that's how it changed acting, in that you saw the level of commitment that you needed to have in order to really stand amongst the greats and to walk amongst the greats. And that inspired a lot of actors. It probably intimidated other actors, but you saw what you would have to do to like try to win an Oscar or to get recognized or to really put yourself through hell in order to achieve the ability to embody this character on screen that you're going to play in your respective movie. And I think that's the way it changed acting. It showed you, it kind of combined the method with Stanislavski and with this idea of living in the moment. And it was an incredible combination of all those styles and techniques coming together to work for Robert De Niro and set a pretty high bar for everybody who was coming afterwards in the 1980s.
So that's a fantastic answer, and everyone's going to like your answer better than my answer. I agree. I agree with everything you said.
Who knows?
You know how I have my silly category of the great films that ruin Hollywood?
Oh, yes.
You know, the basic idea being that they're these great movies, and then everyone tries to imitate them, and they don't do it that well, and then that becomes the problem. I think with both Brando and with De Niro, yes, everything you said is true. These are inspiring performances that led great artists to make daring and powerful choices. I totally agree. But then there's also a bunch of other actors who took this on as an affectation.
Yeah,
I'm so into my art that led to a lot of bullshit too.
No,
you're
100% right. And, you know, Kilmer is one of those guys that walks the line between that. Because Val, if you watch the documentary and also if you read stuff growing up with Val, there were certainly stories about his asshole demeanor or arrogant demeanor or entitled demeanor. And those have validity. But he was also a guy who, when he was fully invested in a character, like say what he did with Jim Morrison in The Doors, you have to stand back and marvel at what he can do as an actor and what he can bring to life as an actor. So, some of those people are people, or Jared Leto, who is, of course, an Oscar-winning actor, but again, behind the scenes, a lot of people talk about how difficult he is to work with, certainly during the Suicide Squad stuff as the Joker. And so there are some people who pervert the approach in order to indulge their more selfish elements of their personalities. And that is where you have to be responsible on set with the techniques you're using and respectful, while also finding the authenticity within the roles you're playing and the moment you're playing on set. And as you said, Steve, unfortunately, some people are irresponsible with that. But that's with everything, right?
Yeah. Well, and my guess is when Robert De Niro was in like Analyze This or Meet the Fockers, he wasn't doing this. He came to do the job.
Yeah,
you know?
doing the job. Yeah.
By the way, one more thing about the could have been a contender speech. Again, on the commentary track, you can hear Jake LaMotta perform it. And you know what?
Nice.
It's pretty good.
Yeah, well, he's been doing it for 30, 40 years.
Yeah.
I would hope it was good.
And then as we're rolling into the end, in comes someone to tell him he's got 5 minutes, and that is Martin Scorsese is coming in there to talk to him. Jake stands up, checks himself in the mirror, leans in.
Go get him, champ.
And then throws that flurry of punches and says,
I'm the boss, I'm the boss, I'm the boss, I'm the boss, I'm the boss.
By the way, Jake LaMotta really did do this, both before fights and before shows.
Yeah.
But what he says about himself, he says he had conditioned himself to be mean and violent and vicious, and it took years to condition himself to become a human being again.
Wow. It's an interesting ending. I've always felt it was a bit anticlimactic because we end up right where we started, which is a little bit like 39 Steps, you know, the great Hitchcock film. But the whole when he's doing his punches, and then I'm the boss, I'm the boss, I'm the boss. So just to show you, like, he's still fighting his fight, you know, and that's to me what I take from that end is that the stage is just another ring for him, and he's still fighting his fight in there. So he prepares for the stage like he prepares for the ring, because it's going to be a fight out there. Will he get people to like him? Will people laugh? Will they enjoy what he does, or will they boo him? So he's going out there to see what he can do, and sometimes he's going to win. Most of the time, most of the time he's going to win. Sometimes he's going to lose. It just all depends on what happens on that stage. So I like that element of the ending, even though it feels a little anticlimactic.
By the way, watching this moment, do you think about the end of Boogie Nights?
Mm-hmm.
Totally,
very much an homage to that. Yes, what he does with Dirk Diggler in that film, in that scene. Let's go out there and show him. Yeah.
And then on the black, we see, so for the second time, the Pharisees summoned the man who had been blind and said, "Speak the truth before God. We know this fellow is a sinner. Whether or not he is a sinner, I do not know," the man replied. "All I know is this. Once I was blind, now I see." First of all, Martin Scorsese says that it was through working on this film that he learned how to see again.
Mm-hmm. The quote, I wasn't surprised at all. That, as we said before, this is a very personal film to Marty, so no surprise that Marty put that quote at the end there for himself. So and I think he earned it, considering how great this movie was.
I think the quote to me comes off weird. It makes perfect sense if I think about Martin Scorsese.
Right? No, 100%. Yes,
but I don't think it makes perfect sense. I don't know how I'm supposed to apply that to Jake LaMotta.
Yeah,
I
agree.
Because if you go like, "Oh, Jake LaMotta was blind and now he sees," it's like that's not the movie that I watched.
Yeah,
no, I don't see that. The other thing that comes up on the screen is remembering Haig P. Manoogian, teacher, NYU professor, May 23rd, 1916 through May 26, 1980. With love and resolution, Marty. So we have this text on the screen, and obviously this is a person that meant a lot to Martin Scorsese as his instructor at NYU, but this person also meant a lot to Thelma Schoonmaker. And the thing is, on one of the bonus materials, she has this incredibly strong reaction to talking about this person, and I just wanted you to hear a little bit of what she had to say.
He was wonderful, and Marty wanted to show Haig that I'm sorry. Just give me a minute, I'll be fine. I don't know. I didn't expect that to hit me like that. I think Marty wanted to show Haig that finally Marty felt he had made a film that justified everything that he had often argued about in this wonderful way with Haig. And so it was very upsetting to us when we've heard that Haig had died just as the film was being finished. And because of that, Marty decided to put the Bible verse at the end of the film and dedicate it to Haig. The loss was very big for both of us.
So, John, how did you feel watching this?
Well, it obviously it moved me and touched me because it came out of the blue. And, that's what happens when when someone really impacted your life and you saw how it impacted someone who you have loved and respected for a very long time, like Thelma has for Martin Scorsese. And so you're being asked about it at a certain moment, and then the wave of that memory comes over you. And it could be because you're just in a heightened emotional state for whatever reason. It could be because you haven't talked about it in a long time, so you haven't thought about those memories in a long time. For any number of reasons, it could come on. But I found it to be a really touching and heartbreaking moment to see her reaction to it all. And clearly she showed her strength too, Steve. I thought that was fascinating. She, some people go like, "Oh, give me a second," and they kind of walk off. She said, "Give me a minute. I'll be past this. Give me a minute." And so she's a very strong woman, clearly. And when she got through it, she just spoke about, and I think it hit her like the sadness of the fact that this was the film that was going to show this teacher who Marty said had contentious moments with him. He totally respect and loved him, but he was going to show him, look, I was able to do the things that I told you I could do as an editor, as a director, and put this together. And maybe in a way he wanted that acknowledgement from the teacher, and the fact that he never got it. I think sometimes those are little gifts we get that we don't get that acknowledgement because it keeps us hungry. And we may hate it on the outside. Objectively, you may look at it on the outside and go, that's a shame. But sometimes not getting that validation or that acknowledgement keeps you hungry as an artist and as a creative. I'm not saying it should be that way. I'm just saying sometimes it happens that way. And maybe that may be one of the reasons why Marty, kept seeking to make great films,
It really hit me strongly. And I think the thing that hit me the most is I think of, Scorsese and Schoonmaker as like they're the masters, they're the elder statesmen. They're the people who, we all look up to. And in this moment, it just hooked me into the continuity of learning in the sense that, you get old a lot faster than you expect. You still feel like that student inside looking for the approval of your professor. And the fact that Thelma, with all that she's accomplished, could still be moved by Martin's and her desire for approval from this person who was their teacher.
Yeah.
And that person too was probably still seeking the approval of their teacher. And that here you and I am sure there are people in your life, and there are definitely people in my life that I still think about. I still want to prove to them that their investment of time in me was worth it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like to show like, no, and what's really crazy is frankly, I know that to some degree, you and I have probably been those people in younger people's lives who are doing the same thing, that we're part of this continuity moving forward. And that it really, really moved me.
Yeah.
We have another question from one of our patrons, Paul Sevilla, who says, who is the biggest tragic figure? Travis Bickle, Jake LaMotta, Sam Ace Rothstein from Casino, or Frank Sheeran in The Irishman?
I don't think any of them are tragic, to be honest with you, because they're all the architects of their own destiny. Like Bickle doesn't join a cult and gets manipulated by the cult in a way. I mean, I guess maybe I'm thinking about this on the fly. So Bickle is a Vietnam veteran, right? Or so we think, or so he says. We don't really know what the truth is about Bickle. So that could all be a lie. And so what he does there throughout the movie, it all is about him and what he wants to do. So he is very much the architect of his own demise. I don't know what's tragic about him. Maybe if you consider all life valuable, then maybe it's tragic that he ends up killing a pimp to save Jodie Foster in some ham-handed attempt to be noble, but he still ends up driving his car at the end, or his taxi at the end, supposedly. I don't think Jake LaMotta is tragic because he's a terrible person who did terrible things, and there is no desire from him to explore why. If he had explored why, then we might find some tragedy in that. Ace Rothstein, no fucking way. That is hubris and arrogance. And so there's nothing tragic about him because he lives and he survives. He doesn't get killed and beat up and thrown into a pit with his brother, like what happens to Joe Pesci. And then Frank Sheeran, again, he willingly gets involved with the mob in order to enjoy the money and the status and the consistent work that it brings him. So there's nothing tragic about him. Yeah, he loses his daughter, but you join the fucking mob. That was always a possibility. So I don't find tragedy in either of these characters, in my opinion.
I'm struggling to answer it too. I'm kind of going like, well, on the one hand, I was trying to remember back to like Aristotle's Poetics and definitions of tragedy and stuff to try to frame an answer, and I can't really pull it off. But because in my brain, like the great tragic figures, they have nobility in them too. That's what makes it feel tragic. And none of these people really have that as far as I'm concerned, particularly like Ace Rothstein. It's like, no, not at all. And where I finally come to in trying to answer this question is like, well, how do I feel at the end of these movies? Where am I the saddest?
Right.
I'm not sad at the end of Taxi Driver. That's not the emotion I'm experiencing. I'm not sad at the end of Casino. That is not the emotion. I experience emotions, but it's not like, oh, I'm so sad about this.
Right.
I am sad for Jake LaMotta, and I am sad for Frank Sheeran. Not because they're good people, because I don't think they are, but just because it's sad. It's sad to me that someone has led this life that led them to this place, you know? Like, so I guess that's the best answer I have for this.
Fair.
So a little bit about post. Thelma Schoonmaker does not want to go to set, and I've heard this from many, many editors, because they don't want to be seduced by the hard work, by the time it took to make a shot, by how the charisma of the actors. She just wants to be looking at the footage. She did go to dailies every day. De Niro was there for dailies every day, and every day there's conversations with De Niro and Scorsese and Schoonmaker about what takes they like, what do they like about them, understanding what they were going for, and then there's tons of experimentation on the set, and there's tons of experimentation in post. And a lot of times the experimentation, this is so important for people who are filmmakers to remember, when you do an experiment, there's a damn good chance it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to work the way you think it is. So they're continually trying to put things together and move things around, different sets of intercutting. Originally, as I think I've mentioned, there was a whole flashback structure where you were going back and forth with older Jake. That all got taken out. They switched the bookends. They dropped other flashbacks. The mix, just the mix, which normally, like when I mixed the assistants, this is the sound mix, this is the final step, it was 2 days. That's how long. Maybe it was 3 days to do the full mix on the assistants.
Wow.
there were 2 months mixing Raging Bull. They're working 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Marty is sleeping at the studio. They're working till early, all night, all day, all night.
Wow.
And they come up against a deadline. They've got to premiere at a festival or something.
Yeah.
They've got 5 minutes because the time is like, we have to lock the mix down and then we have to go strike our prints so that we can get it, rushed over to wherever it's got a screen. They got 5 minutes left. And Marty was like, I can't hear where they say Cutty Sark, which is like in the scene at the Copa with Joey where he sees Vicky, I think. I can't hear the words Cutty Sark clearly. And the sound supervisor's just like, that's it. I'm calling it. We're not going to get Cutty Sark to come out. And Marty just goes nuts. And he says, fine, then take my name off the picture. This is not a Martin Scorsese film. That's it. That's over. The producer just goes, fine. You don't want your name on your picture. You don't want your name on the picture. We got to get a print to get it to Toronto. And they go to Toronto for the screening. And it sounds terrible. And they go to the projectionist, and this is how screenings often work. He's like, what are you talking about? I just bought brand new $50 speakers from Radio Shack. And then this is the 2 months of stress trying to make everything perfect. And now you're playing over $50 speakers from Radio Shack. They go to screen it for UA, which is the studio that had bought it. And they screened it for the executives. They had never seen anything from the production. They never saw any dailies. They never saw any early cuts. They just saw the final version. And there's just silence, and everyone's kind of filing out after the movie. After the screening, the head of the UA walks up to Marty and says, young man, you're a genius, and walks out.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
This is our last question from Patreon. One of our advisory board members, Brennan Marr, asks, do you think Jake is truly sorry for what he did to his life, or do you think he never felt any regret?
Well, if you look at the movie, yes, the implication is that he is, because how he is in the dressing room, you don't sense that heaviness and that hangdog guilt. You sense that this is someone who's a little bit lighter about the world. So if you were to just focus on the movie, I would say yes. But in real life, as I said, doing the research, reading the interviews and what have you, I don't think that he did. I think that there was some acceptance, but I think he still retained the core part of his personality, which was at times aggressive, abrasive, insulting, demeaning, pushy, and hurtful to people around him. And look, this guy was married 7 times. 7 times, people. That doesn't mean he's a very, easy guy to be with and forgiving and loving and has found the way and he's found the light. So clearly, this is a guy who had issues staying married and had issues overall in life. So outside of the film, I would say no, but inside of the film, I think you're supposed to feel that way when you leave the movie.
First of all, I got to wonder, what are you thinking when you're wife number 7? You can't imagine that you're signing up for anything that's going to work out well.
Well, you know how it is, man. People always think they're the ones that are going to change that person, or you know what? They weren't ready for the right person. It's always that way.
The first 6 were just a fluke. So here's how I'll answer Brennan's question.
Yeah.
I think that Jake LaMotta is filled to the gills with regret.
Okay.
And I don't think he's ever been truly sorry for anything. That's how I'll put it.
That's a strong statement.
Because regret means feeling bad about something.
Right.
Being sorry means actively seeking redemption, or I don't think he's ever actively, he doesn't say he's sorry to Joey. He doesn't say he's sorry to Vicky. He's never truly sorry. Right. The movie made $23 million on an $18 million budget, which is definitely not a hit.
No.
It was nominated for Best Picture, Director, Actor, Supporting Actor, Actress, Cinematography, Editing, and Sound. De Niro won for Actor, which certainly is deserved. He was up against Robert Duvall in The Great Santini, which is a fantastic performance. John Hurt in Elephant Man, fantastic performance. Jack Lemmon in Tribute, which I've never seen, and Peter O'Toole in Stuntman. Joe Pesci lost to Timothy Hutton, who won for Ordinary People. He's really good in it. But yes, I agree. Judd Hirsch was also nominated for Ordinary People. Michael O'Keefe for Santini. Jason Robards for Melvin and Howard, which I haven't seen in forever, but it's good. Mary Steenburgen won for Melvin and Howard, which I'd completely forgotten.
Yeah.
Best director. The other nominees are David Lynch for Elephant Man, Richard Rush for Stuntman, Roman Polanski for Tess, and the award went to Robert Redford for Ordinary People.
Nonsense.
It's complete nonsense. And I haven't watched Ordinary People in a long time. The last time I watched it, I remember sobbing and it being very moved. It's a good movie. And Robert Redford is a good director. Raging Bull is a film for the ages, you know.
Seems like don't get me wrong, Ordinary People is a good movie, but
I think it's a good. Do you think it's a good movie?
It's fine. Okay. It's fine for what it is. I'm not as moved by it as other people are. To me, it's a waspish film, so I don't really. Sometimes I don't really connect to those films. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't. And this is
just got to embrace your inner wasp.
John. I know, right?
Got to find it.
Maybe I'd like Clue as a film as well if I ever embrace. Anyway, yeah.
So before doing this breakdown, when I saw who won the award for Best Sound, I would have agreed. Now I don't. Best Sound was won by Empire Strikes Back. But which is a great film and has great sound. But now hearing kind of what happened in Raging Bull, I've sort of gone this way. Cinematography went to Tess that I've never seen. And Thelma Schoonmaker did win the Oscar for Best Editing. But she says that the person who actually should have won the Oscar for Best Editing is Martin Scorsese because of how she shot it.
Huh. Wow.
In 2012, the Editors Guild voted Raging Bull the best edited film in history.
Jesus. That's a hell of a compliment.
I mean, I can't argue it. I mean, it's, as I've said many times, editing is one of the hardest things to figure out because you don't know what they had or what the process they used to get there. By the way, just on this is kind of a sad note, but I had mentioned Johnny Barnes, who plays Sugar Ray Robinson. He desperately for years tried to get a Sugar Ray Robinson movie made. It never happened. There was a 20th anniversary screening in 2000 and he went and he couldn't afford a ticket. And he goes up to the box office and asked, do the actors get in free? And they said, no. And he said, would you charge De Niro? And he walked away. Isn't that sad?
It is sad. And I know what you're referencing. But the journalist who was chronicling this paid for his ticket. So he did go in to see the movie. I'm glad. But then he left before the movie was over. And you know who bought the rights to Sugar Ray Robinson's life, but then never did it? Eddie Murphy.
Oh, wow.
And he would never meet with Johnny Barnes. He never met with Johnny Barnes about it. Johnny tried to meet with him, and he never met with him about it. And Johnny never did. According to IMDb, he didn't do anything else on screen acting-wise after he did Raging Bull. So, yeah, it's a shame.
It truly is.
Yeah. This was an interesting ending for the film. As I said, Vicky and Jake went and saw the film multiple times. They went to the premiere. They went and saw it in different areas of the country together. And each time there was a desire from Jake's side to make this happen again. And Vicky resisted him all the way and never gave in. But what she did do the next year after the film came out was she posed for Playboy at 51 years old. And so that was her way of like kind of standing up for herself and showcasing herself and embracing herself and putting herself back out there. And then she started a cosmetics line and she started all this stuff. So Vicky LaMotta took advantage of this situation to, kind of help herself in her life because of all the abuse she took. Why not? And so she saw an opportunity, embraced it, and carried that forward for many, many years. Jake did what he did. But also, there was a lot of tragedy in Jake LaMotta's life. And after the movie ended, there was a lot that he went through in terms of loss and the things that he experienced as he got older. Because he lived a pretty long life, Steve. He was he lived till 95 years old. With all the punches and the abuse and the insanity that he endured, he lived that long, which is kind of crazy to think about. He outlived Vicky, who died in 2005 at 75 years old from an open heart transplant surgery complications.
Oh my God.
His elder son, Jake LaMotta Jr., died of liver cancer in 1998. His younger brother, Joey, died in a plane crash of Swiss Air Flight 111, as I said, in 1998. But his nephew, John LaMotta, fought in the heavyweight novice class of the 2001 Golden Gloves Championship Tournament. He later became an actor, and one of his roles was as Duke, who ran the bar of that name featured in the television comedy series Frasier. Duke is Jake LaMotta's nephew. So it's kind of crazy how that all works out. And his nephew, William Lustig, is a well-known director and producer of horror films and the president of Blue Underground Incorporated. So yeah, 7 wives, a number of children, he had 4 daughters as well. So this guy kept going for a long time, put together a 50-minute New York City stage production that you were talking about earlier, Steve, Lady and the Champ, that ran for a little while. And then also continued the story, wanted to tell more of the story. And he fought to get the rights back for his life so he could put it together for this film called LaMotta, The Bronx Bull, which is out there. William Forsythe from Raising Arizona plays Jake LaMotta in the film, and Paul Sorvino plays his dad. So the relationship with his father is very much the focus of that movie. So an interesting thing. And also your brother Joe Mantegna is in that movie, as well as Tom Sizemore, Penelope Ann Miller, Ray Wise, and Natasha Henstridge. So my man kept going and then died eventually of pneumonia in Florida at the age of 95 in 2017. So a hell of a long life.
2017.
Yeah.
Wow,
Think about that.
Yeah. Because you would think with the punishment that he took, that's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. My man lived through the Depression and only died 7 years ago.
So before we get to final thoughts, there is, believe it or not, one more thing, John, I wanted to bring up. And, we record these episodes sometimes over many days. And this is something that literally just came up this morning. As I think I've told you, one of the first things I do almost every day is I listen to the daily podcast from the New York Times. And this morning's was about, and I know this is going to sound like it has nothing to do with Raging Bull, but this morning's was about the horrible shooting in Maine, in Lewiston, Maine recently. And they were talking about the shooter, and they were talking about he became paranoid, he became angry, violent, and he did this thing, committed suicide, and they're trying to find a motivation. And the first thing they look is, because he's a veteran, is they go, well, maybe it's PTSD. Right. But they look, and he's never served in an active combat zone. And so they're looking at other things. And this is something I didn't know that they're doing more and more with veterans, is seeing, have they been around a lot of explosions? And they look at him and they see, oh, he had served, I don't remember if it was at a hand grenade range or a mortar range or something like that, but he had been around a lot of explosions. And so they do an autopsy of his brain, and they discover what they found with a lot of professional athletes, particularly football players, which is CTE.
Wow.
And this is something I didn't know at all, which is PTSD is obviously a totally real thing, and a really important diagnosis that so many veterans are struggling with. Yeah. But now they're looking, and more they're finding that these veterans who are struggling with these symptoms of PTSD also were in combat zones where they were around explosions that might have damaged the brain. Wow. And as they're describing the symptoms of paranoia, anger, inability to control emotions, and violent outbursts, I just suddenly went, holy shit, we've been talking about Jake LaMotta for 3 weeks. And I suddenly went, of course he has CTE. Of course, it's just like, awesome. I mean, look at the guy, loves taking punches, repeatedly take punch after punch after punch to his head. And if you look at the things that we've been describing in this movie, it's like a textbook diagnosis. And so it's I don't know if it changes my feelings about the film. It 100% changes my feelings about the real person, Jake LaMotta.
Okay, well, I don't know if I can 100% go there with you, because most CTE, I would argue no CTE patients live to 95.
That's totally true. Yeah.
Right. So you'd have to take a look and see, and he didn't become almost all the CTE patients become suicidal, or they start to lose concept of reality and inability to connect, and just start living out of their cars. There's a lot of stuff that happens with CTE. And I think it's tough to say whether he had that, because you'd have to open up his brain and slice in there and see. Because I saw this wonderful 4-hour documentary on Frontline on CTE years ago that I thought was fantastic. And so that really broke it down. And then watching that concussion film, and then watching the Junior Seau documentary that they did with 30 for 30. So CTE is something that I'm very well aware of, and some of my favorite players from the Steelers, 1970 Steelers, had CTE. And so, and some of the current players like Ricky Waters had CTE for a while. He was a great player back in the 90s. So I would have to see more to see if I believe that he had CTE because of those situations. And no one seems to come around and say like, oh, we found him wandering by himself, talking to people and things of that nature. So I think there'd have to be some more evidence I'd like to personally see before I see that. But it's not out of the realm of possibility, as you said, because of the amount of pounding that he took and abuse he put his body through. But ironically, it may be because he didn't drink that often. He didn't do all this, that it didn't affect him in the long run. But only he can really know, and the people around him can really know.
Well, and like literally at this point, all you can do is autopsy a brain after someone has died. There's no, it's and of course I'll defer to your knowledge as being way more. You're much more the sports person. You studied this much more than I am. But I will also. I think the shift that happened in my brain was I went from Jake LaMotta is this person I don't like, who does all these things that I don't like, and he's very difficult to be around. To suddenly my brain shifted and went, what if Jake LaMotta is the victim of a disease? Like it changes the way that, and it just suddenly shifted like, oh, maybe I can't see this character in the way that I thought I could see them.
You're doing exactly what all his wives did, and everybody in his family, everybody's just excusing Jake. You got to deal with what you got. Stop trying to excuse him or stop trying to explain it away. He did some terrible things. He deserves some derision, but he also deserves some grace and some understanding and some acceptance. So, but I hear you sliding into that little bit like, oh, well, maybe it wasn't his fault. And it's like, no. Well, he beat up his wife. He beat up God knows who else. So,
I mean, people are responsible for their stuff. It's funny. We were just talking off mic about some family stuff where we saw certain pieces of behavior that we've had to deal with personally. And it's like,
sure.
To me, it's like there's this thing of keeping two things in mind. One is that is who that person is. And that person is responsible for that. And you have the right to get the hell away from that person or to deal with them in whatever way you need to protect yourself. Yeah. And then there's this other piece of like, well, alcoholism is also a disease, or CTE, obviously a disease, or drug. It's like there's these things where how we look at them changes to some degree as we learn more about how stuff works. Anyway, it struck me so powerfully as I was listening this morning, and I just wanted to get to that before we finish up. But now, John, believe it or not, we have reached the moment where I am required by Cine-Files contract and stipulations to ask you for your final thoughts on Raging Bull.
Hold on.
You're the boss.
I'm the boss. Here's what I'll say. It was such a joy, if I can use that word, to revisit this film again, because, Steve, I love talking about classic films with you. I love diving in deep with classic films with you, and certainly rediscovering the joy of Raging Bull. It has turned off my fear of watching the movie, which I had resisted for a very long time. I don't watch this movie a lot because of the emotional journey that Jake goes through in the film. It's very resonant for me personally, and so it's not an easy thing to subject yourself to. But sitting down and talk about the film and break it down scene by scene and talk about the journeys and discover more about these stories, as I did research for myself personally for the show, inspired by the research you do for the show, I found myself rediscovering the genius of Martin Scorsese and the genius of Robert De Niro coming together at the right time, both of them arguably in their primes, delivering one of the greatest performances ever and one of the greatest directorial efforts ever that will always be something we go back to and reference and talk about when we talk about the greatest films ever made. And so it was a blast to go down this journey. And I think this is a film that still massively holds up, still speaks to the human condition, especially the male condition in our world. And I don't mean that in a way to denigrate the female experience, because this is a film that very much focuses on Jake's experience. And I think it has something powerful to say if you're willing to listen to what happens in the movie and take a look at yourself and realize that you might have to do some work on yourself so you don't end up like Jake LaMotta, having pissed away all these opportunities and positive things in your life because you got lost in your anger and your hatred and your violence that is stemmed from obviously a very difficult upbringing. And so it's on you. It behooves you to take responsibility for your life so that you can be once blind, but now you see, So that's my final thoughts on the movie.
That's beautiful. So I'm going to say two maybe sounding contradictory things. Besides the fact that I should just point out, like, in studying this film, the masterpiece of sound design, of editing, of cinematography, and of course of performance, it's all off the charts. I mean, this is like some really incredible filmmaking. And the two contradictory things that I would like to say is that on the one hand, we have gone deep into this person's life. And as we said at the beginning, like, this is a person that Hollywood didn't usually think was worthy of this kind of exploration.
Yeah.
And De Niro and Scorsese said, no, this person is worthy of your attention. This person is important. We might not like them. We might not want to hang out with them. We might be frightened of them. We might not always understand them, but it's worth examining their lives and really being with them in a really human way. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, agreed, man.
But here's what I'll say. Usually when we go deep into a film, at the end of all that time, and all that study and all that attention, I know way more about the film and the characters in the film and the meaning of the film than I did when I started. That seems obvious.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I understand Jake LaMotta any better now than I did 2 months ago. Like, he is to some degree for me a very unknowable figure. I feel like I'm still looking at him through the shadows of that jail cell where he is attacking himself and pleading. And I still go, well, what is really in your head? What was really in, I can never quite bridge that gap into feeling connected to Jake LaMotta. I am frightened by him. I am fascinated by him. I am deeply sympathetic to him. I'm angry at him. All of those things are true, but I never feel like I can know him. And that just is part of what makes this a great film.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it universal while also making it specific, which I love that. Yeah.
So that is what we think of Raging Bull. We hope you've enjoyed going on this journey with us, and we would love to hear your thoughts on this incredible film. You can visit us on Facebook. Just do a search for the Cine-Files. You can reach out to us on Twitter, Cine_Files, or the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. You can support the show both through our subscription tier on Apple Podcasts and on patreon.com/the Cine-Files, where you can get ad-free versions of the show, Cine-Files shorts, watch-alongs, join our advisory board, and even be involved in picking what some of our next films are going to be. And if you want to buy or stream Raging Bull along with every other film we've ever reviewed, it's at cinephiles.net. And if you want to reach me, SR Morris on Twitter, SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how could people reach you?
You can always reach me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, The Outlaw Nation on Twitch, my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says, and my other podcasts, the Geek Buddies and the Hot Mic, that are out there for you all to enjoy.
That is plenty of entertainment for you to get for your Cine-Files and Outlaw Nation buck. I think you should start jumping in right away. And that is it for this week. We will be back next time, which, can I tell them what our upcoming live show is going to be?
Yes, please. Feel free.
Our next live show is a movie that we have talked about possibly more than any others on the Cine-Files, and that is the mid-'80s Rodney Dangerfield classic, Back to School. If there's anything that's going to be a palate cleanser of this months of Scorsese and Goodfellas and Raging Bull, it's going to be Back to School. I cannot wait to talk with you about this live on our YouTube channel.
Good teacher really seems to care. About what? I have no idea.
I have no idea. And so I think that is it for this week. And we will see you live, our Back to School on the Cine-Files YouTube channel in just 1 week.